Meet Zeke Draker. He was born into the Draker household, a family directly descended from legendary Dragonslayers. However, his time to flex the family title was short-lived. He was soon abandoned because his family deemed him unfit. Apparently, his family wanted a swordsman, but Zeke turned out to be a cursed healer, someone no one cared about. In his pursuit of power, Zeke wandered across continents and eventually stumbled upon an ancient relic, a treasure even desired by the Emperor himself. But in the end, he was taken down by soldiers sent by the Emperor. The injuries inflicted were so severe that even his healing magic failed to assist him. Yet fate had other plans. The ancient relic he had stolen triggered an upgrade system that allowed him to regress to a younger age with these newly granted ancient powers awakened inside. And from this moment on, his real story begins at the Draker household's training institution, the Cradle. Before diving deeper into Zeke's story, it's important to understand the background of his family. The Draker family is one of the three great transcendent households. This renown stems from their ancestor, Tarkhan Draker, the hero who saved the land 1,000 years ago by slaying the evil dragon Bahamut. It was Tarkhan's victory that laid the foundation for the Draker household's prominence. Perhaps due to their lineage, every descendant of the Draker bloodline has inherited the blessing of aura, allowing them to awaken high-level aura effortlessly and excel as knights. That is, until Zeke came along. Unlike his ancestors, he was born without the ability to wield aura, a deviation that cast him as an outcast within his family. After regressing, as Zeke relaxes on his bed totally carefree, the system window suddenly startles him. He immediately goes on high alert, listening intently after hearing the unusual sound. However, after scanning the room and finding no one, he convinces himself he might have just imagined it. But then, a few more system windows chime in. Out of all the system windows, one particular system has the juiciest detail. It goes on to announce that Zeke's soul has received the will of the Elder Dragon, and it has been merged completely with his soul. Soon enough, Zeke is also granted authority over part of the system. And as soon as the activation is complete, his eyesight is swarmed by a plethora of system windows. The first window displays his overall stats, including his class, skills, and a unique skill category labeled Draconian Skill. This skill can only be unlocked once he accumulates 10 points, but his current karma points are 0. Curious, he begins fiddling with the system and quickly learns how to navigate and operate it. Among all the information displayed in the administration status window, what stands out to him the most is the class skill. The reason behind his curiosity is that this word, class skills, is a terminology from Draconic language that is not used in this current era. He has heard about this class skills from his master. According to his master, people of the ancient world classified themselves based on their strengths. Each class trained in specialized techniques referred to as skills. Since Zeke's class is that of a healer, his corresponding skill is called healing. After Zeke awakened, his master, who was female by the way, trained him relentlessly until he was on the brink of death. Her training methods were unusual, and he still remembers the unbearable pain she inflicted on him just so he could heal it back. In any case, Zeke decides to verify if he is indeed a healer, just as the system claims. As soon as he activates his powers, he realizes that he is, in fact, a healer. He's surprised because, in his past life, the time he became a healer was in his 20s, right after his ether hall was unlocked. Since he can't possibly access his healing ability without his ether hall being unlocked, it clearly means that his ether hall has already been opened. This news is as good as it can get. Not only has he returned to the past with all his memories intact, but his skills have also come along. And this just puts him in an even more advantageous position. As he decides to explore the system further to see what other surprises are in store, someone calls out his name and knocks on the door. Quickly, he scrambles to push the system windows aside before anyone can see. However, the impatient visitor barges into the room without even waiting for a response. The man who just entered is Zeke's exclusive servant, Decker. He's apparently here to check if his young master is prepared for the event ahead. Of course, Zeke has no clue what he's supposed to be prepared for. This ticks off this terrifying man, and he is clearly annoyed by how careless Zeke seems. To think that the young master forgot about this special day is just pissing this butler beyond belief. The poor guy, on the other hand, begins to tremble instinctively under Decker's intense gaze. Now that Zeke thinks about it, he recalls that, in his past life, he was always afraid of Decker. Even though his mind is that of a 32-year-old, his subconscious can't shake the fear instilled in this body. Right at that moment, one of the class skills activates, known as Composed Mind. Almost instantly, all of Zeke's trembling, and any trace of fear that had been on his face fades away completely. Apparently, Composed Mind is a skill that ensures the user's mental state remains unaffected, no matter the situation, allowing them to maintain a calm and composed mind. Zeke finds it rather convenient that it can activate on its own. Meanwhile, the butler continues repeating himself, trying to remind his young master of the importance of the event ahead. However, Zeke doesn't respond immediately. After much insistence from the butler, Zeke finally starts paying attention and admits that he does remember. He clearly recalls the evaluation test, known as pancration. To understand what pancration is, a little context is needed. All Drakers go through a training system called the Cradle, starting when they're 7 years old. For 5 years, they undergo strict basic training. Every year, the instructors evaluate the incoming students through competitions in swordsmanship and combat, specifically pancration, a no-holds-barred combat with no rules. Opponents are typically chosen by the instructors, but on occasion, students may choose their own adversaries, provided both parties consent. Since there are no rules, injuries are common, and sometimes students don't make it out alive. But because this competition determines which class the students will be placed into within the academy, the children have no choice but to fight with all they have. The day of pancration finally arrives, and the students find themselves gathered in the amphitheater. At the center of it all stands the instructor, who reminds everyone that today is the day of pancration, and that it marks the final part of their evaluation. All the students eagerly affirm what the instructor has said, and seeing their enthusiasm, even the instructor is somewhat intrigued by the high spirits of the crowd. This man is actually the head instructor, Panmark, and without further delay, he decides to get things started. In the crowd, the students begin to notice Zeke standing among them. Some students find it laughable that Zeke is once again here after the humiliation he suffered last year. The duel between two students finally begins, and a student named Aaron ends it before it even starts, delivering a single uppercut that knocks his opponent out cold. But while the other students find the quick fight fascinating, Zeke isn't impressed at all. He remembers the time when he, too, used to be terrified of such fights when he was younger. But compared to what he went through in his past life, this is nothing. As Zeke yawns repeatedly while waiting for his turn, one particular student, Leon Conrad, is eagerly waiting for the moment to have a duel with our boy. Eventually, the time for Zeke's match arrives, and his opponent just so happens to be Leon. While my guy is rubbing his tired eyes, Leon throws a jab at him, instantly reminding the humiliation Zeke suffered the previous year. Well, of course, Zeke has not forgotten about it. He vividly recalls how he had begged Leon for forgiveness back then. Those memories are painful, but they're in the past now. Leon has always been Zeke's opponent every year. Our boy knows him all too well, how dirty of a player Leon is, and the kind of trash family he comes from. He is certain that the only reason he's facing Leon in this duel is because Leon pulled some strings behind the scenes to fix the match. Zeke would rather have a dog who bites rather than having a cousin like him. In Zeke's past life, he was never able to meet his 4 siblings of direct bloodline, but there were more than a dozen cousins, and many of them were more than willing to bully him. Suddenly, Leon calls out to Zeke once again, and just like before, he tries to humiliate him by reminding him of the miserable defeat he suffered the previous year. He further questions Zeke whether that level of humiliation wasn't enough to keep him away from participating in pancration altogether. While Leon continues to throw one verbal jab after another, Zeke remains as cool as a cucumber, and it's all thanks to his composed mind ability. Although Zeke is calm and collected, there's still a limit to his patience. He won't tolerate some insolent bug badmouthing him repeatedly without consequence. Well, our boy's response only serves to trigger this bastard even more. And this time, Leon even goes so far as to grab our boy by the head. But his foolish move only earns him a solid punch to the face that sends him flying away. This brutal punch was possible thanks to Zeke's skill, Critical Strike. The ability inflicts significant damage to the opponent, and has the added risk of being countered if the attack fails. Fortunately for Zeke, this punch landed perfectly, leaving no room for a counter. The bastard, on the other hand, is writhing in agony, with his hand covering his own face. Zeke, meanwhile, reflects on how he only meant to knock the guy out and had no intention of activating this ability. The instructor quickly rushes to tend to the injured brat while scolding our boy for attacking even before the match began. But my guy just stays nonchalant in his response and wonders aloud why they had to wait for someone's command to start the battle when they're already standing in the arena. You see, the one who strikes first has the advantage, so he didn't shy away from taking this opportunity. While he says this, he looks absolutely menacing, and the sheer amount of killer intent he's exuding is enough to leave the poor instructor trembling. Meanwhile, Leon just assures the instructor that everything is fair game and tells him to just let the battle begin. After all, if Leon steps back on a moment like this, it would be way too humiliating to bear. As soon as the instructor gives the signal, Leon recklessly charges at his opponent. But his reckless charge earns him a punch right to the face. As surprising as it is, the punch Zeke landed didn't hurt at all. Initially, Leon was quite afraid of taking a direct punch, remembering how painful the first one was, but realizing this punch didn't hurt him at all only fuels his foolish confidence. All he has to do, he thinks, is put his guard up, and Zeke won't be a threat at all. Leon quickly notices our boy using his left hand for a counterattack again, so he ducks down. In that critical moment, he takes advantage of Zeke's vulnerability and takes him into his grasp in order to push him over to the ground. But suddenly, Leon takes a hit so fast that even we couldn't see what happened, leaving him trembling like a leaf. Even the instructor on the sidelines is completely boggled, unable to wrap his mind around the fact that he just witnessed a 12-year-old kid pull that slick move. The moment Leon dodged Zeke's counter and tried to take him down, the instructor was certain Leon was going to win. However, Zeke punched Leon square in the chin and escaped his grasp. It's on Leon for letting his guard down, thinking he had Zeke right where he wanted him. But our boy, on the other hand, remained as cool as cucumber, despite the fact that his counter failed. The concentration and precision needed to inflict such exact and effective damage is a feat in itself. The instructor is actually wondering if this is really the Zeke Draker they thought they knew. The bratty bastard, however, is in shambles after taking that brutal punch. His brain is scrambled, and before he can even react, he takes another blow that causes him to trip. But he quickly steadies himself and retaliates with a punch of his own. At that critical moment, one of Zeke's class skills activates automatically, Heightened Sense, which temporarily enhances his perception. With this skill, Zeke can see the punch coming at him in 960 frames per second slow-mo, making dodging it a piece of cake. As soon as the punch zips past him, Zeke quickly grabs Leon's extended arm and slam dunks him hard onto the ground. And the impact was so brutal that it literally shattered the ground beneath. Another skill activates, known as Precise Stab, which helps Zeke target the Leon's weak points for critical damage. After pinning the bratty bastard to the ground, Zeke balls up his fist, ready to obliterate his face. Poor Leon begs him to stop, but my guy still goes through with it, landing the punch square on his face. The sheer brutality of the act leaves the instructor sweating his balls, along with the spectators watching in stunned silence. The final hit feels immensely satisfying, and after this little battle, beating the crap out of his bully, Zeke feels a sense of calm washing over him. He's glad that thanks to this little show he pulled off, his other cousins will think twice before messing with him again. Not that it matters though. If they dare say or do anything, he'll make sure to silence them for good. It seems that wasn't enough to instill fear in these incompetent bastards. One particular punk, too complacent for his own good, challenges our boy and picks him as his pancration opponent. This overconfident, cocky punk is Jaken Vardek, itching to make a statement, though he plans to let his blows do the talking. Well, Zeke doesn't mind at all. In fact, he's sure he'll get bored if Jaken comes alone, so he offers him the chance to bring a few other students along to make things more interesting. Our boy specifically calls out another student, Liam Stone, and suggests he join Jaken. Apparently, Liam is nothing more than Jaken's lackey. This suggestion feels like a slap in the face to Jaken. The very idea that he'd need someone's assistance to fight a brat like Zeke is a humiliation he just can't stomach. But Zeke keeps pushing his buttons, which only enrages this piece of flying trash even more. Jaken's seething now, eager to beat Zeke to a pulp. As both contestants stand in the arena, the instructor this time explicitly warns Zeke not to move before the command. Well, it seems like Jaken did bring his servant along after all, which only makes Zeke even happier. After all, in Zeke's past life, Liam had a reputation for being an exceptional fighter, even earning the title of Mercenary King. Back then, as Jaken's servant, Liam joined the cradle in the academy. However, being a distant relative, he was overlooked in education. He desperately begged to join higher education at Academy Valhalla, but ultimately ended up in the Knight Order of a small nation called Baranon. When Baranon eventually fell, Liam became a mercenary. In those chaotic times, the strong naturally drew followers. With his long tenure as a mercenary, Liam rose to prominence as a Red Knight, and eventually founded the Stone Mercenaries. He united the three largest mercenary groups, earning the title of Mercenary King. When the Empire hired the Stone Mercenaries, Liam entered the Continental Wars, where Zeke, along with the Northerners, faced him as a formidable foe. But this time, our boy is determined to carve out a very different future for himself. As soon as the instructor gives the signal, Jaken confidently lunges forward, delivering a punch with such force that it disturbs the air currents around him. But, not surprisingly, Zeke casually grabs and blocks the punch as if it were nothing. Jaken quickly flings our boy's hand away and retaliates with a kick of his own. But that kick ends up backfiring against this filthy bastard. As soon as his kick connects, Jaken feels an immense amount of pain, causing him to stumble. It turns out he hit Zeke's strong barrier, which was created around his elbow, and that caused serious damage to Jaken's leg. As Jaken looks at his injured leg, Zeke quickly lunges forward, balls up his fist with his skill activated, ready to throw it down. But poor Jaken quickly tries to protect himself, putting his hands over his face. Seems like Jaken miscalculated Zeke's moves a little, because our boy never intended to land a hit on his face. Instead, he tags the bastard right on his injured leg. After that sneaky move, He follows up with a punch to the ribs, one that's enough to make Ken gag up copious amounts of blood. The overconfident bastard is finally on the ground. Left with no pride or dignity, he angrily instructs his sidekick to kill our boy right away. The time has come for our boy to deal with Liam, and this bastard is exuding some serious killing vibes as he strides toward him. The most annoying thing about fighting Liam is his insane reach, which puts Zeke at a serious disadvantage if he lets Liam attack first. So my guy takes his stance and decides to take the lead, throwing a few blows of his own. Using another skill known as Slash, Zeke moves so fast that all anyone can see are silhouettes throwing a barrage of punches. The skill Slash allows him to launch a relentless flurry of attacks at the enemy, completely interfering with the enemy's sight. The guys watching from the sidelines are feeling true despair, witnessing just how much of a gigachad our boy is. Zeke knows they're curious and confused because none of them have seen anything like this before. You see, in a place where sword dominates, seeing a brawler's fist-fighting technique is a rare and almost unheard of sight. As impressive as this ability is, it's also taking an equally heavy toll on his body. But even that isn't the biggest challenge here. The monstrous physique of Liam is what truly tests Zeke. No counterattacks, no dodges. Liam is just taking it all with his guard up, and now you can only imagine how aggressive he was during his time as the mercenary king. Since Zeke is unable to do any real damage, he prepares to unleash one final devastating strike, one that will be powerful enough to break through Liam's guard. As soon as our boy launches his strike, Liam effortlessly dodges it by redirecting it. What pisses Zeke off even more is that this bastard didn't even flinch or turn his eyes to see the strike, and he just dodged it like it was nothing. In the next moment, Liam seizes the opportunity to make his move. Lifting Zeke high into the air, he prepares to slam him hard onto the ground. But Zeke isn't about to let that happen without a fight. He quickly strikes Liam over the head. His class skill, Heightened Sense, activates, and with it, he completely turns the tide. Using this advantage, he locks Liam in a deadly neck hold with his legs, cutting off Liam's air supply. No matter how strong Liam's body is, he's still powerless without oxygen reaching his brain. However, it seems Zeke overestimated himself. Liam retaliates brutally, landing one devastating blow after another. The relentless flurry of punches even forces the poor guy to gag up blood. But despite the barrage of hits, Liam's body finally begins to falter. His strength wanes, and eventually, he succumbs, losing consciousness due to the lack of air. The spectators are left in awe, their breaths caught in their throats at the sight of such a jaw-dropping battle. But among them, there's one particular student who, instead of feeling worried or shaken, seems oddly exhilarated. He's actually excited and can't wait to take on Zeke as his opponent. After the day of pancration was over, our boy returns into his quarters, where his servant inquires about his well-being. He has heard that Zeke was gravely injured during the matches. To this, Zeke just shrugs it off, claiming he's perfectly fine. However, the butler does not relent, and insists on checking his pulse to verify that everything is truly okay. Zeke can tell that this old coot just wants to check whether he has awakened his aura or not. Eventually, he extends his hand toward the servant, who quickly shoots a blue energy through his hand and into Zeke's. Seeing this blue energy makes our boy pause and wonder if his servant might actually be a blue knight. You see, when checking if someone has awakened, most people simply examine their dantian. But this man is being unusually thorough with it. Imbuing someone else with aura is difficult enough on its own, but for this old man to control it so precisely like this, he must be a blue knight. Apparently not all knights are the same. They are classified according to their martial prowess and aura manipulation proficiency. White swordsman is the novice level, and most children before the blessing rite are white swordsmen. A yellow swordsman is the level you attain once you've awakened your aura and opened your dantian. All trainees of the cradle become yellow swordsmen after the blessing rite. Once you've learned to freely control aura, you earn the title of knight. The purple knight level is when you can reinforce your sword with aura, while the blue knight level is achieved when you can manifest an aura blade. Beyond this, the realm of those who have transcended their limits, the realm the mercenary king Liam and our boy had reached before his regression, is known as the Red Knight. Then there's the Black Knight. But only a few of these monsters exist across the entire continent. With that in mind, Zeke can't help but wonder how someone as skilled as his servant, who is clearly talented enough to be a commander, ended up acting as his babysitter. Still, no matter what, Zeke is sure there's no way this guy can detect his ether, something only 2 people in the entire world can use. Finally, the old man finishes his examination. With a firm tone, he questions his young master, asking if he might be hiding something. Of course, Zeke plays it cool and feigns ignorance. He counters by asking if the butler perhaps knows something that even he doesn't. A moment of silence fills the room, but it's quickly broken by our boy, who just drops the conversation by claiming that he was just joking. The butler then hesitates but can't help himself and questions Zeke about how drastically he has changed. This makes our boy to halt his movements. He turns around with a glare in his eyes. The question his butler asked is entirely wrong. Instead of asking why Zeke has changed now, the butler should have been asking why it took so long for Zeke to change. He then informs his butler that many more surprises are yet to come, so there's no need for the servant to be shocked repeatedly. All he has to do is follow the commands. The humble servant acknowledges his master's words and bows his head in submission, ready to follow without question. The butler then reports that the training room Zeke had requested is already prepared and waiting for him. Zeke is pleased with the report and dismisses the old man to get some well-deserved rest. As our boy walks off alone, he has a nagging fear that his butler might have been ordered to keep an eye on him. To counter this, he decides it's best to keep the butler close, so he can manipulate the old coot and extract the information he needs. Zeke still has to figure out who ordered his butler to watch him. He's pretty sure that no one from his mother's side would dare do it, which only leaves his siblings. Once Zeke enters the personal training room, he's immediately struck by how lavish the place is, which only confirms that this household truly lives up to its name. Before starting his training, he decides to check the system. With a command, the system panel pops up in front of him. There, he notices that his slash skill has reached proficiency. He has no clue how it happened, but he makes a wild guess that it probably leveled up from using it repeatedly. The skill is naturally activated based on his actions, and he doesn't need to do anything in particular to activate it. From what he can understand, if he learns something new, it will likely be added here as a skill as well. He's still unsure about the difference between a skill and a class skill, though he does notice that they both activate similarly on their own. Lastly, there's the Draconian skill, but he can't view it yet because it requires 10 points to unlock. He presses on the option, and the next system window informs him that he can earn karma points by killing monsters. His current karma points stand at 0. Speaking of monsters, Zeke reflects on how there are plenty of them in the dungeons, but he needs to be at least a purple knight to gain access. For now, though, he's more curious about why he regressed to the past and what this system is all about. The concepts of skills and class skills are also something in his curiosity list. At the back of his mind, he has a nagging feeling that all of this might be connected to that ancient relic. However, he can't be certain since he doesn't have enough information to piece everything together. Whatever the case, he grabs his sword and decides to use everything at his disposal to grow stronger, whether it's the system or the Draker lineage. In this world, there are two known powers, the aura of the knights and the mana of the mages. Knights reinforce their aura in the dungeons, while mages refine their mana through circles. The two powers are at opposite ends of the spectrum, meaning if one has awakened one power, they cannot awaken the other. However, Zeke was unfortunate enough to awaken neither a Dantian nor a circle. This inability led to his abandonment by the Draker household, forcing him to wander aimlessly until he met his master during his vagabond days. His master taught him many things, but the most valuable lessons were the art of healing and the Ether Hall, a unique technique his master had developed. Through the Ether Hall, Zeke learned to harness the energy of nature, known as ether. To this day, he and his master remain the only ether users in the world. After only 2 hours of training, Zeke feels as though he's about to collapse. However, his class skill healing activates in tandem with another class skill, Vigor Recovery. Healing is an exceptionally rare skill, one Zeke hadn't even known existed before meeting his master. If others were to witness him using it, they'd brand him an irregular. That's why he refrained from using it during his fight against Liam, and had to rush to heal himself the moment he returned to his room. After his body recovers to full strength, Zeke decides to continue practicing. He knows he cannot afford to waste even a moment. By dawn, Zeke looks utterly exhausted after relentless training. The entire hall bears the evidence of his efforts, with deep gashes scarring the floor and trails marking where his sword struck. Anyhow, a week passes by and we find ourselves in Cradle Cafeteria. There, Zeke overhears some students talking about him. They think he's turned into a completely different person now. Since he is a born loser, they assume he might have dabbled in black magic. Meanwhile, in another private lounge, all the big shot students are having dinner together. The first one chowing down on steak is Raina Tarun. Then there's this guy, Owen Zimmons, calm and composed. And across from him sits a beaten-up Leon, looking as rowdy and impatient as ever. Owen tries to tell him he should eat properly because he'll need the energy for the swordsmanship duel. Leon, on the other hand, gets ticked off for no apparent reason, and smashes his hand so hard on the table in frustration that the juicy steak he was served unnecessarily falls to the ground. Because of this table slam, even Raina's piece of steak jumps off her plate and falls, leaving her totally enraged. Her intense glare finally humbles Leon a little. Apparently all 4 of these students seem to hate our boy, so it's not surprising they're together. But even though they're in the same group, they don't seem to get along all that well. The only thing keeping their relationship intact is their shared resentment for Zeke. Owen admits that Zeke was both brave and impressive during the pancration. However, he's convinced he will be pathetic when it comes to swordsmanship. As far as he knows, Zeke doesn't even know how to hold a sword properly, so he's no threat to anyone. One of them points out that Zeke is so weak he had to get a customized sword because the basic ones were too heavy for him. Still, it doesn't make sense to Leon that he lost to that inferior piece of shit. He's convinced Zeke only won against him in Pancration because of pure luck. Well, it looks like Reina doesn't share the same thoughts. If they actually believe this nonsense, then none of them have the right to be knights of the Draker household. With those words, the lady leaves the room. Before we jump to the day of the duel, here is a little context about what this sword duel is all about. Unlike Pancration, sword duels involve real swords, making them the primary cause of most incidents within Cradle. It's also where the difference between cadets' skills becomes glaringly obvious. A month after the current final exams, the Blessing Rite will commence, the event where the Drakers awaken their aura. The day of the duel has finally arrived, and the instructor commands Zeke to come up next. My guy casually walks onto the scene with a giant sword resting over his shoulder. The sword is literally bigger than him, which certainly doesn't go unnoticed. Everyone finds it hilarious, thinking Zeke believes that the bigger is better, so it will somehow give him an advantage. The person stepping up from the other side is Reina, who looks absolutely fired up and dramatically throws down the gauntlet to challenge our boy to a duel. Well, my guy is more than ready to take on this challenge and accepts it without a second thought. It doesn't sit well with Reina to see Zeke effortlessly lifting a claymore. Now that she's facing him in person, she can tell this isn't the same Zeke she once knew. The person she knew once could barely hold a sword properly. His presence is so striking that she begins to feel intimidated. But she quickly snaps out of it, disgusted with herself for even thinking that she could be intimidated by him. Backing down isn't an option now, especially since she was the one who issued the challenge. Meanwhile, Zeke is also feeling quite intimidated. He knows his usual tactics won't be enough to get the victory he wants, because a duel against the Lightning Knight is no joke. It's downright nerve-wracking. You see, Reina Tarun was well-renowned and had earned the title of the Lightning Knight in his past life. She made a name for herself during the Continental Wars, and is recognized as one of the greatest of the next generation of Drakers. She's one of the rare few who awakened her aura even before undergoing the Blessing Rite. As far as Zeke remembers, she must have awakened her aura a few years ago. However, she hasn't used it in Cradle because she's been focusing on improving her fundamentals. As soon as the signal to commence the duel is given, both contestants clash their swords right away. After the first clash, Reina steps back before charging at him again. With one strike, she sets Zeke sliding backward. Just these two exchanged blows were enough for our boy to draw the judgment that she's even better than he expected. The feisty lady charges at him once more, swinging her sword as fast as she can, lighting up the area with sparks. In the background, her friends are getting restless and impatient, urging her to just finish him off in one strike instead of playing around. But one of the wiser ones reminds these idiots that Reina isn't toying with him. It's Zeke who is pushing her around. Now, switching to her perspective, she can clearly see the openings and vulnerabilities in Zeke's guard. Yet, every time she tries to exploit them, her sword is quickly blocked by his sword, almost as if he's applauding her attempts. What's even more frustrating is that after he blocks one attack, he intentionally leaves another vulnerable point for her to strike. It's as if this duel isn't about winning. It's meant to teach her. After a few exchanges, Reina finally steps back, utterly exhausted by the back and forth. She wants to catch her breath before coming back for more. Meanwhile, Zeke doesn't have a single ounce of sweat or tiredness on his face. In fact, he looks bored. He's not that impressed. She is fighting honestly without using any aura, but it's expected from someone obsessed with their fundamentals. Now that they are at it, he decides to help her break out of her shell. He intentionally takes an extremely low stance, as if he intends to close the gap in one move. Reina is confident in her speed and doesn't think much of it. But in the blink of an eye, Zeke closes the gap and is right in her face before she even has time to react. He swings his sword so hard that it literally cracks the ground with the force of his giant blade. The girl, on the other hand, is sure that as long as there's distance between them, she can react to his moves. Zeke swings his sword through empty air, but it wasn't meant to hit her. Instead, the debris he flung into the air with the force of his swing strikes her square in the face, leaving her nose pretty banged up. Next, Zeke charges at her with his massive sword in hand. As she sees that shiny blade only a few centimeters away from her neck, she's sure she's done for. But as surprising as it is, the sword Zeke was holding suddenly goes flying into the air and lands a few feet away. With that, the crowd quickly declares Zeke the loser, while showering Reina with praise for winning without even using her aura. However, the instructor knows this isn't what it seems, and his face is painted with sheer horror, as if he just found out he has more than one father. What the cadets didn't notice was that as Zeke's attack closed in on Reina, she used the faintest amount of aura. So subtle it was barely noticeable. The fact that Zeke forced her to use her aura, despite her vow not to until she entered the academy, is nothing short of insane. As Reina stands there, her face riddled with doubt and regret for breaking her promise, Zeke suddenly charges at her. With his fist balled up, he strikes her square in the throat, reminding her that this isn't over yet. She buckles over her knees with blood leaking from her mouth. The other coward sitting in the cavea is outraged because this was supposed to be a sword duel, so they won't stand for such cheap attacks. Everyone present points their fingers at Zeke out of contempt, calling him shameless for pulling off such a move. Meanwhile, Zeke remains completely unbothered by all the noise and insults. He calmly asks Reina if she wants to continue. Reina, on the other hand, stubbornly believes she hasn't lost yet, reasoning that he only struck her because she let her guard down. But as she thinks about it, a realization hits her. If he had been holding a knife instead of throwing a bare-handed punch, she would already be 6 feet under. For that reason alone, she honorably concedes defeat. The crowd, which had been eagerly mocking Zeke moments ago, falls into stunned silence. Zeke Draker, who was labeled human scum just days ago, has achieved an undeniable victory against one of the most talented children of the famed houses. The fact that Reina Tarun, the Lightning Knight, was defeated is simply unfathomable to most of those present. The scene transitions to Abel's castle. Outside, a dangerous battle has just ended, leaving behind a trail of bodies in the pit. William witnesses the horrific scene and fails to understand how Abel is calmly drinking tea without any worries. Abel's current focus is on a letter that mentions Zeke Draker's victory over Reina, the prodigy. He gets up and asks about how long they have until the blessing rite comes around. Since they've got enough time until the full moon, Abel believes it's fitting to pay the Draker family a visit. Hearing this, William is rather shocked that he's choosing to go by himself. But to this swordmaster, he's itching to know the kind of awakening the youngest of their family is going through. While Zeke's victory left the rest of the cradle stunned, he didn't care much about his achievement and merely resumed his training, refusing to celebrate. 1 month passed, and the day of the blessing rite finally arrived. Zeke still doesn't comprehend how he managed to become a Red Knight in his original life, especially with the shitty body he has. Having finished training, he commands open the status window. His mastery skill is according to his expectations, standing at the expert level. What's even better is that every time a skill ranks up, its mastery level resets, as evident by his numerous skill tiers in rank D and E. Also, he's advanced his mastery with Swift Step skill, the same one he used against Reina. Thanks to his sharp senses, he can tell the butler is watching him. Decker informs his master that they're to leave in 2 hours for the event. Zeke thinks it's time to get ready. Zeke hasn't visited the main estate in a long time. He's on his way to the Draker family's house situated in the Duchy of Troy. While the family's main residence is located in the center of the continent, the blessing rite is held where the legend of the Dragonslayer surfaced. Having arrived at his destination, Zeke steps outside the carriage and into the dragon's nest lair. Having made his way inside, he has an enlightening realization. The people here are VIPs with incredible fame. He knows for a face that some of them are informants sent to observe him. Despite their intentions, Zeke thinks everything will go swimmingly well once his awakening blows up in their faces. That is until he spots a certain man, a man whose very presence makes his blood boil. That man is none other than Abel, who shakes hands with someone and expresses that he had no interest in coming to the event. None except for one person, and that person is his youngest brother. The second son of the Draker family is nicknamed the Lion Blade, but he's got an even more prominent name that Zeke knows by heart. The Butchering Knight. Our boy does his best to maintain his calm facing his elder brother. After all, he doesn't have many options in this situation. In his previous life, the second son never showed up to observe Zeke in the blessing rite. This means his actions in the pancration competition have altered the trajectory of the future. Clenching his fist in frustration, Zeke realizes that he's acquired a chance for himself. Before long, the blessing rite is underway. Aaron is told to come out as the first warrior. He promptly places his arm inside a mystical pool, causing his arm to surge with a blue essence. It's explained that during every blessing rite ritual, each member of the Draker bloodline awakens their sealed aura right around the time they're supposed to graduate from the cradle. This happens at the age of 12, and Aaron has just become an example of the first to be awakened. Now, compared to regular knights who awaken after 20 years of age, this process is extremely fast for the Draker family. Only a few exceptional cases among them, those with aura, can also awaken a particular trait of the Dragonslayer. This trait is called mana inhibition. Interestingly, the mana lamps are reacting harshly and with sparks of red. Those who end up obtaining mana inhibition end up strong enough to rival the likes of Red and Black Knights. This is called pure blood awakening. Due to the mana inhibition trait, the candidates will require usage of special gloves made by the family, because otherwise, they'll never be able to enjoy a regular life. This example is shown with Reina, who has already undergone the awakening process and wears gloves consistently. After one has been able to prove that they're pure blood, they are granted the Draker name. And then, they are also provided with a wealth of support along with endless benefits to help them. The spectators murmur as finally, the most anticipated awakening candidate steps up to the scene. They all think that this child's awakening will surpass even that of Reina's. As Zeke steps in front of the statue, he finds himself surprised that he's found himself here again. The previous experience was traumatizing in his old life. While the blessing rite was the only thing that helped him advance through the cradle, this was the day he earned nothing but embarrassment. However, reality is now different. He possesses the ability to heal, manipulate ether, and on top of everything, he has learned to be tenacious and strong with his own abilities. That's why he's expecting a lot from the bronze statue to do him a favor here. As he dips his arm inside the pool, the statue reacts. It shakes before coming to an abrupt stop, shocking everyone in the room. It's something that has never happened to any candidate before, and it has left even Abel speechless. As he takes out his arm, the boy confirms his thoughts. He knew things wouldn't be different this time around. It's because of Abel that he jumped to conclusions and became too confident. The rest of the people are just shocked that the most anticipated candidate failed to awaken. They make fun of him for not awakening despite being a direct descendant. Then there's the question of him beating Reina, which everyone now believes must have been through a sneaky trick or something. Still, our boy has zero fucks to spare and instead focuses on becoming stronger via other awakenings. The system greets him with a sudden apology after experiencing an error. Zeke looks perplexed as the system informs him that necessary information is missing from his class identification. This part of the message captures his attention. The system tells him that the input is complete, and that the terminal has identified the user's talent as a healer. With that, he unlocked his class and simultaneously gained access to the rare class. Zeke can't believe his eyes as the statue begins to illuminate red lights, indicating a pureblood's awakening. No one can believe that he's starting as a red knight off the bat. The system connects and unlocks the ancient dragon's blessing from within Zeke's soul. While this is happening, Abel is calmly observing his brother. The talent of kin is the first thing that is awakened, and then his already awakened talents combine together, morphing together into a new class of its own. There is so much going on that Zeke doesn't understand, especially when he sees a new unique class called the Immortal, which the system has chosen for him. The shimmer of gold light surrounding his body attracts the attention of the spectators. They're certain to have seen the red light from the statue, but they're filled with doubts. Zeke has understood the situation perfectly and thinks it's pointless to speak against them right now. They question if the statue is broken, but then how would one explain the mana lamp reacting to the reading? There wasn't any mana inhibition, so it can't be a pure blood's awakening is what they want to believe. That's when Abel begins to applaud, mocking the people for failing to congratulate the newly awakened purebloods in a single go. He thinks this is an opportunity to celebrate the occasion instead of murmuring doubts. Since they can't speak against him, they give them a round of applause. Abel demands a pair of gloves to be prepared for his young brother. Zeke receives the gloves but has a low opinion of them. He walks away while Abel is satisfied with what he sees. As for our boy, he's pissed that he received Abel's help from all the people. The blessing rite soon comes to an end, and a celebration party for everyone to enjoy is next. Zeke is on his Sigma male grind set and doesn't want to show up to the party. He comes to a sudden stop after a voice calls his name. This is completely against Zeke's expectations, as he wasn't expecting Abel to pop out of nowhere. He wants to know where the kid is going and even congratulates him with a handshake. Despite hating his older brother, declining his handshake here would put him in trouble, so he acts all nice and reaches to shake his hand. That's until he remembers a bloodbath from the memories of his previous life. For some reason, Zeke retracts his hand and refuses to say a word. Abel reveals a hint of his malicious nature, blaming his little brother for the awkward situation. In his thoughts, Zeke simply can't accept shaking the hand of a man he deems the most disgusting and despicable. Abel doesn't really care much and waves him goodbye. He's expecting to meet him later and walks away without bothering him much. To his words, Zeke confirms that he is also determined to meet his brother one day. Fast forwarding to the party, where many are busy discussing the recent awakening of the two purebloods. No one has yet to figure out what Zeke's golden light implies, as it has never happened before. They wonder about his location as he's nowhere to be seen. We do catch a glimpse of Zeke, but he's unwinding in a different room, having barely survived the suffocating social event. Also, he still can't place how he's the only one unaffected. The thing about pureblood awakenings is that they have mana inhibition as a trait. It's supposed to showcase that the Draker family is against dragons, who are known for being the source of mana. Be that as it may, most machines require mana as their necessary fuel. The fact is, a pureblood needs the use of special gloves for the cause. If Zeke is supposed to be a pureblood awakener, then he should have faced problems the moment he took his gloves off. But right now he seems unaffected. This causes him to pop open the status window, which is different in its properties from before. Instead of having mana inhibition, he possesses a unique trait called mana reflection. An intrigued Zeke decides to read deeper into the details of the skill. There he discovers that mana reflection creates a distortion field that is responsible for nullifying nearby mana. It's classified as a skill and doesn't react to the mana lamps as it's not passive in effect. He was identified as a rare class healer before the blessing rite, but now he's considered a unique immortal, which he doesn't understand. Confusion sets in as all of the graduates of the ceremony achieve blue aura with typical awakenings. The only person who was an exception to the case was Reina, who received a red pure blood awakening. The same case goes for our boy, but then it eventually transitioned into gold. The system told him that it was missing critical information regarding the classification. Zeke wonders if it was considering the bronze statue as its classification terminal during the awakening. The moment the system injected the necessary information inside the terminal, the statue reacted strongly and emitted a red light. Everything is starting to fall into place now. Zeke believes that the statue isn't there to determine if one has awakened or not. Rather, it's supposed to judge their class. Red implies a rare class and gold implies a unique class. Furthermore, the statue is a relic that has been here even before Terrakon's time, the man who founded the Draker family. Class identification doesn't really exist as a concept nowadays, which is why the statue's singular purpose is to distinguish the awakened from those who are not. They have misinterpreted the purpose of the red light as a kind of pure blood awakening, when in reality it means that they've achieved rare class. What's really fascinating is that not even the clan family's head is yet to know about this. Interestingly, Zeke finds that he's acquired 100 karma points to his name. He wonders if he received them during the ceremony and quickly decides to put them to use by purchasing the Draconian skill. The system updates with an influx of information after the purchase. He has acquired a whole bunch of beginner skills like Dragon Eyes, Might of the Dragon, and Devour. The first two make total sense to him, but the last one does not, as its only purpose is to help with digestion. The dude really doesn't want to invest his points into something he's uncertain about, so he goes for the Dragon Eyes and Might of the Dragon instead. The second skill is riskier to use as it involves the use of aura, so for now he activates Dragon Eyes to see what's so special. It's a little undermining because Zeke doesn't perceive anything noteworthy or new to his senses in his surroundings. That's until he opens the window to stare at the statue in the garden. The skill amps up his magnification, allowing him to view farther objects from up close. Also, he's granted the ability to view detailed information about the object he's viewing. All kinds of properties regarding the statue's build flood his body with information. It takes a toll on his body and he feels extremely exhausted after using the power. Zeke thinks his powers will be sparingly useful if they have such a heavy drawback. Thankfully, his healing factor kicks in, fixing his exhaustion. What's surprising is that Zeke didn't even input the intention to heal. It just kicked in automatically. Inspecting the system screen, he realizes that all of his class skills have converted into passive abilities and even jumped up a level. The healing factor allows him to repair his body without triggering the activation. It's an excellent version of his previous skill. While it seems like healing is way too OP, it's not something you can consistently spam. Otherwise, he wouldn't have died in the first place. At the same time, the healing factor is infinite in nature. In order to test his evolved skill, he takes a blade and gives his arm a slight cut. Seconds after the injury, the healing factor automatically kicks in, healing the cut without leaving any marks. The usual time to graduate from the academy is 5 years, but a confident Zeke thinks he'll be able to get it done in 2 years. The Draker Academy is the greatest knight academy ever known. Any aspiring knight would sell anything to take their spot inside. Located in the Duchy of Troy, the academy thrives with the spring life each time a new semester comes around. As Zeke walks among the others, he notes how the higher-ranked students are comparably no different from adults. They're just as capable, and if he were to compare these guys to the cradle, then they're nothing more than children from great families. Zeke thinks his entire family is messed up. Among the thriving branch families supporting the Draker family, 3 families are the most prominent and have the influence to be called the Great Families. The first is the Tarun of Strength, which Reina is a part of. The second family is Zimmons of Wisdom. And lastly, there's the Vardek family of Gold. The children of those 3 families are here, but Zeke couldn't spare a second thought for them. The scene cuts to the high-class dormitory of the Platinum Mansion. This high-class dormitory boasts a training hall, an exquisite library, and all kinds of premium facilities. The best of the best students are supposed to enjoy the luxuries. As for the Pure Blood Awakeners, they're granted an additional privilege of Floor Master. This floor is known as the Platinum Floor. A maid greets our boy's arrival, and he's soon escorted to his assigned floor, where others are waiting. Arriving here, Zeke is a little exhausted to find so many people, despite him being awakened as a pureblood. He's told that Decker is waiting for him in another room. Without wasting time, Zeke goes to meet him to see what's up. The butler has something to show to his master. He surprises him with a premium pair of gloves that he initially received upon awakening. He's already acquired new gloves, but Zeke's got his eye set on a new sword now too. He picks his blade, which the butler supports without concern. The Duchy of Troy is known to be close to the mountain ranges. That's why it's got an abundance of good iron and skilled craftsmen, who prove to be an irreplaceable source of strength for the alumni. Decker wants to search for a craftsman for the young master, but Zeke is fine handling it himself. He wants to see them in person, and requests Decker to set an appointment in advance. The name Galleon Halbert is someone not even Butler has heard of before. He intends to contact this man for an appointment soon. At the same time, he reminds Zeke to review the documents before his first class begins tomorrow. Later that day, Zeke is busy reviewing the notes when he comes up with an interesting observation. The platinum floor is reserved for him, so he could test out his new draconian skills and help them develop. A maid comes to inform the young master that Reyna has sent a dinner invitation to him. Zeke is surprised upon hearing this and decides to pay a visit. He comes around to her floor and finds himself a little stumped because Reyna is out here playing Al Capone or something. She welcomes him and apologizes for the unique dinner setting. Zeke doesn't mind and takes his seat. They first decide to eat and then talk. Observing her from across the table, Zeke can tell that she's utilizing the aura in her lower abdomen even in a setting like this. He wonders if she set her sights on becoming a purple knight, which might explain why her sword skills have reached their limit. It's a waste of good potential in his eyes. Finished with dinner, Zeke is exhausted and surprised that she ate way more than him. With their appetites satisfied, she wants to get to the meat of the situation. Reyna offers him full support of the Tarun family. Zeke thinks this is some sort of misunderstanding and reminds her that they're both pure-blood awakeners. She fires back by claiming that he's the one who's wrong. As pure-bloods, they do have a bunch of privileges to enjoy, with the platinum floor included in that bundle. However, they also don't receive benefits in terms of growth. Centuries of academic and practical knowledge is reserved in this brilliant academy. Then there are personal instructors to guide you and evolve your abilities. If someone doesn't have either of these things, they'll definitely lag behind. Reyna strongly argues that the support families are critical. She exemplifies Abel Draker, a man who is also a pure blood of the family and the youngest to ever attain the title of a White Knight. At his current level, he's one of the strongest Black Knights, and even he received support from the Zimmons family. While the patriarch of the Tarun family has yet to explain why, his orders are absolute that he wants to extend the Tarun's family's support to Zeke Draker. Reyna reiterates her point, but our boy is in the mood to fuck around with her feelings and calmly says no. This causes her to experience a shock as she just can't fathom how it's a bad deal for him. Getting up from his seat, Zeke turns to leave, claiming that he's actually uninterested in anything like that apart from being a pure-blood awakener. To pay her back for the meal, he has one personal piece of advice to share. Zeke shares that her sword is much too powerful, and he figures that it has to be related to those men behind her. Zeke offers that her greatest strength results from her flexibility of her adaptable body. He advises against attacking her opponents head-on. Instead, she should use her fluid movements to calmly redirect her opponents to land a precise, single attack. Zeke thinks that if she's capable of doing that, she'll inevitably grow much stronger than she already is. Saying that, he parts ways, leaving her frustrated. She wanted to utilize her family's tradition of strength, which is what she's been doing up until now. Still, Reyna can't deny a part of what he just said. She has been endlessly trying to become worthy of her family's name, which influenced her sword style quite a bit. Zeke was able to catch that. While Reyna was young and praised as a genius prodigy, no one offered her any advice. This interaction with him has left her to reevaluate her opinion of Zeke Draker as a person. Skipping ahead to Zeke's monologue, he's reflecting just how powerful he's gotten with his new skills. After all, even an entire night's worth of training couldn't stop him just now. The dude literally has infinite stamina now. He's gonna last longer in bed than the age of the universe. In his previous life, this place was nothing more than hell for him. But with his newly awakened state, it's actually pretty chill now. Zeke is enjoying the peace that can't be bought with money or power. As he's minding his own business, the representative of the Zimmons family approaches him. Owen is the third son of the family, and he's an expert in manipulation. He blackmailed and bullied our boy in his previous life. Interestingly, he also invited Zeke to a dinner invitation only to get rejected in the face. Surprisingly, Owen is acting way too friendly in this life. Zeke realizes what invitation letter he's referring to and releases a snarky remark. Owen questions why he refused to reply, only for Zeke to coldly respond that he doesn't have to give a damn about the fucker's messages. His rude remark just now captures Owen's friend's full attention, who thinks the boy is being overly blunt to a polite invitation. Zeke pulls a "who the fuck are you" card, and really couldn't be bothered about knowing him. So he leaves, realizing that this show-off just wants to suck Owen's dick by appearing strong. Shockingly, this bastard has the gall to attack Zeke unannounced. He managed to block the attack despite it being covered in aura manipulation. Durbin Roswell roars his name and claims that he's the mightiest of them all. Yeah, the mightiest refrigerator maybe. The youngest Draker simply laughs at his little speech, as this man isn't even a knight and barely even a cadet. Zeke lunges forth with his lightning-fast speed, smashing this guy's abdomen with a hook that could rival Mike Tyson's. It knocks the fuckface into the ground, while Zeke happily invites the next person from the Zimmons family to come and catch some smoke. Owen draws near him and states that he's unimpressed by Zeke's goading of his own strength. The group leaves Zeke to himself, who thinks of them nothing more than a circus crew. Let's explore the intricacies of the Draker Academy for a second. It's split into two classes. The first is the normal class, where one is taught if they're lacking talent. That class is overcome with effort and a disciplined regimen. The second class is the special class, where certain cadets can choose their subjects outside of the basic subjects. In this academy, the top dogs and the elites gather in the special class, which is also why Zeke had his personal expectations of who'd end up here. But none of them seem noteworthy, and they're just the alumni from the cradle whom he already knows. He even jokes around that it's not a special class but rather a cradle class. Class is in session, and the instructor at the podium is pleased to introduce someone very special today. This mysterious person was once the commander-in-chief of the Empire 2 decades ago, and the same person responsible for blocking the Empire's invasion with their impeccable strategy. Dean Howard Draker is welcomed in good hearts, the man who runs the show for this academy. Known as the war hero, Howard is worshipped as a symbol of hope and praised as a standard for tactical war. But in reality, the truth is far darker than his fame implies. The information he coincidentally leaked to the enemy for his personal survival helped him luck out of the situation. In short, he's a lucky sellout who survived to relish the glory. Zeke deeply despises him and claims that he's the perpetrator responsible for getting him kicked from the academy the first time around. With nowhere left to go, Zeke wandered aimlessly and lost in the Duchy of Troy. There he was caught by the slave traders and ended up sold to the Southern Cartel. The very existence of this man is rooted in a traumatic memory for our protagonist, and you best be damned he's going to get his revenge on this fat geezer someday. The dean's speech comes to a close and the teacher takes over to begin their classes. The cadets are instructed to head to the arena at once for some indoor training. Inside the training arena, Zeke is baffled that he has to sit through the basics of dragon slaying. After all, in his past life, he couldn't wield aura and wasted 2 whole years when normally it takes the average person 3 months to do it. The instructor welcomes the students, introducing himself as the Rose Knight, Andre Draker. He's in charge of teaching them the basics of dragon slaying. The students are a little underwhelmed because they don't know anything about this guy. The name strikes Zeke's memory. He recalls that Andre isn't a pureblood awakener who still managed to graduate quickly from the academy, and was praised as a valedictorian from Valhalla. He isn't even from the family, but his talent is simply so remarkable that he earned the Draker family's name. This man is the guy your girl tells you not to worry about. Zeke admits that the special classes teachers all vary in levels, but this dude is notorious for his shitty personality. Andre shows them a demonstration by telling them to keep quiet so he can start the class. He has the cadets drawing their swords, preparing for the training. His eye catches Zeke's special sword, which is enormous compared to the others. Zeke doesn't have any trouble demonstrating just how easy it is to wave around for him. Andre's resting bitch face commands him to step foot in the arena. He thinks the boy is being overconfident by picking a sword unfit for his body. Of course, this is just typical teacher talk, and Zeke wanted this to happen, hence his choice to pick the sword. He arrogantly boasts that he could defeat the instructor with the same weapon. It's quite the provocation that shakes Andre. The scene is getting tense, so much so that the system activates a mental defense skill for our boy to withstand the situation. Happy to oblige, Andre prepares to draw his sword to offer a boy a practical experience. But it's just what Zeke wanted. The instructor even lays out a condition for Zeke's victory. He will not only choose to ignore the boy's arrogant words, but also grant him permission to do whatever he wants in his class. The instructor even gives him a leeway, that he'll go easy and won't even use his aura on the cadet. But that's just playing right into Zeke's advantage even more. He's extremely confident in his ability to best Andre since he knows about the man's weakness. However, since his watchful brother is keeping an eye on him, Zeke doesn't want to risk gaining unnecessary attention like last time, so his battle strategy is to cut Andre's uniform just a bit before accepting defeat. The fight begins as Zeke launches an immediate swing against his teacher's neck. However, Andre deflects his strike even at that range, demonstrating the skills of a blue knight. The fight's going to be tough, and Zeke knows it. He bounces around and attacks from every direction, only to get deflected by his teacher's quick reaction time. The rest of the cadets are stumped to see the knight's brilliant ability to withstand Zeke's attacks for 30 minutes straight. Interestingly, Andre finds his blade quivering and his body slowly getting exhausted. He can't fathom how the boy is inexhaustibly performing without getting tired. Despite suppressing his powers greatly, the fight is starting to become difficult for him. This only goes to show just how brilliant the average pure-blood awakener of the Draker family is, to the point it is considered unfair to compare them. As for Zeke, he's capitalizing on Andre's shitty stamina against him. As for his aura, a typical Draker's aura cultivation is known for its uniqueness. It should be activated during training and all kinds of daily tasks, even sleeping. It should be indistinguishable from the basic need of breathing. So in this case, since Andre is so used to maintaining his aura, he's uncomfortable and unnaturally weak when suppressing it. That is the one factor helping Zeke get an edge against his instructor. Andre deflects the cadet's blade one more time, but Zeke hasn't given up. He doesn't want to lose like this. His ego demands that his opponent be forced into using aura. Zeke changes his strategy from creating openings to going for a different approach, an approach that will require Andre to use his aura no matter what. In other words, an extreme situation. He flips back to the ground, but only this time he darts ahead with incredible speed. It's the activation of the swift step skill. Andre finds himself overwhelmed by the cadet's lightning-fast movements. Attacking from his blind spot, Zeke activates Critical Strike as if to put everything in this one attack, while Andre is still left questioning how a cadet can deploy such an advanced skill. The second he turns to face Zeke, he puts the faintest amount of aura in his feet, allowing him to evade the attack in quick succession. Without waiting for another second, Andre activates Sky Slice and sends the cadet flying. It was a really powerful attack, so much so that it chips Zeke's sword and injures him enough for his healing factor to jump in. Despite his broken healing factor, he collapses in the arena, while Andre sheaths his sword and turns away frustrated. He officially announces that Zeke is exempt from the class and asks if there's anyone else like him who is willing to give him a try. Since they're all scared shitless from what happened to Zeke, they don't even dare to raise a voice against his fury. From then on, the class resumes for everyone except for our boy, who's chilling in the hospital bed and glazing at his performance against Andre just now. His original plan to cut his uniform was wasted, but instead, he made Andre use his aura, forcing him to acknowledge the kid's abilities. It's a good outcome as his teacher was humbled in the fight. That said, the final attack that Andre used was actually the most basic move of the dragon-slaying arts. The Sky Slice may be a basic technique, but it was massively amplified with the power of a Blue Knight, resulting in a monstrous output. Still, Zeke is glad that he was able to stand his own against a Blue Knight, and he's confident he's at that level thanks to his infinite stamina and healing. But those two things alone won't be enough for a life filled with freedom. He demands true freedom that could only come from overwhelming strength, the kind of power that would make him immune from the strength of his superiors. As he's busy in thought, a drunkard comes around to check on the boy, realizing that this is the youngest son of the Draker family. Our boy is startled seeing the dipshit's face because a drunkard is the last thing you'd expect in a medical ward. Not only was he unable to sense this guy's presence, he also mouthed pretty bad things about the patriarch of the Draker family. Zeke tries to inquire about his identity, but this drunkard is busy injecting himself with more booze. The man is really curious to ask the boy about his shocking regenerative abilities. After all, he just survived a serious internal wound in his body. The system assesses the situation and activates mental defense for him. Zeke refuses to budge because he knows for a fact that nobody is aware of his healing skill at the academy. He feigns ignorance, prompting the man to take serious measures as he attempts to attack the boy. Zeke dodges his palm strike, which is sharp enough to slice the bed. This makes him wonder if this guy is some sort of assassin. Zeke uses the bedsheet to blind the lunatic and senses extreme danger, so much so that he activates every last one of his skills for an all-out offense. Despite being blinded and unaware, the man easily catches the boy's blade and praises the boy's ability to adapt quickly. Zeke rushes backward anxiously and wonders what he means by mercenary. He assumes the mysterious guy might know something about his past. Seeing a Draker like Zeke throw away his sword and prioritize his life, the man believes he's better suited to become a mercenary instead of a knight. Our boy finally understands his words, and the feeling he gets from the mysterious guy makes his doubts certain. The power gap between them is so huge that the guy can easily kill Zeke if he's here for that. The protagonist assumes he's probably the same level as a red knight. The man points to his heavy claymore and believes he just picked it up from the basic supply. He wonders why Zeke, with such insane talents, is wasting his potential wielding a weapon like that. The protagonist becomes certain the man might be even stronger, but out of nowhere, Andre appears looking for the mysterious guy. He shocks Zeke and calls out the garden keeper, Dexter. Zeke finds it hard to believe, while Dexter questions how Andre managed to find him out. The knight remembers seeing Dexter at the training room earlier. He orders Zeke to get lost if his injuries are healed already, so our boy awkwardly tries to leave, but Dexter stops him and offers the kid to come to the academy's western greenhouse if he wants to learn something useful. Everyone goes silent for a second, but then Zeke arrogantly declines and leaves the room. Dexter becomes annoyed and feels nostalgic, as Zeke's father had the same arrogant attitude. Since Zeke's not a gullible kid anymore, he quickly catches up and believes if the gardener has the balls to mention Arthur, the patriarch's name, so casually, then he's definitely the person who only took Andre as a student in his entire life. Duke Draker, the Gale Knight. He's also one of the knights capable of using martial force. The crazy man went against a whole kingdom all by himself. The guy suddenly disappeared out of nowhere after becoming the talk of the town, so Zeke was not expecting him to be living a peaceful life at the academy like this. He guesses maybe Andre also came here because of Dexter. He wonders if Dexter got the Duke title because of his overwhelming tenacity or something like that. He recalls hearing a rumor that the crazy man even became a Black Knight just because he's obsessed with the color black. He finds it hard to believe, and even though he's sure the Duke is interested in him right now, Zeke doesn't care about it because he's not after just some light lessons. He's so greedy for power that he wants to at least learn the man's secret move if he's going to become Dexter's disciple. Zeke smiles and decides to change his interest and greed into tenacity. At the Magic Academy, Professor Phantom awkwardly continues teaching the class and asks if anyone has a question. The whole class ends up sleeping out of boredom, which is a bit demotivating for the professor. So, he continues his lecture, but the protagonist raises his hand and questions about the mana energy transfer law the professor just mentioned. Phantom becomes excited and starts acting differently since it's the first time getting a question. He takes his time and explains everything to Zeke. After the class finally ends, the students wonder why they're being taught about magic theory, but the others just call it nap time. Zeke has a completely different opinion about the class because he was able to understand everything with ease. He believes the professor is definitely a capable man. Phantom stops him and expresses his feelings. He's glad he was able to actually explain something to a passionate student after ages. So he offers the protagonist to come and ask about anything without hesitation if he's curious or doesn't understand a concept. He awkwardly shares he's still an alumnus at the Delphoa Magic University, so he has access to a lot of information. This surprises Zeke, as he wasn't expecting the professor to be involved with the Magic University of Delphoa, the nation that gave birth to magic. He takes Phantom's offer, as there's no harm in getting close to a capable mage. He believes mages who have a good grasp on math are usually great thinkers, so it's better to have one as a colleague instead of a stuffy knight. He hopes the professor ends up being useful in the future. As soon as Zeke exits the academy, he spots Dexter and realizes the guy is already running out of patience just after a week. Dexter asks if it's finally over, and before the protagonist says something, he cuts off the kid and starts questioning why he didn't pull up to the greenhouse. Dexter was hoping he would get the hint when the guy mentioned he was ready to teach something useful, but Zeke repeats his words and lets the guy know he's not interested. Dexter becomes annoyed and starts acting like a kid, but Zeke explains he's sure Dexter is no ordinary person. But he's busy with individual training, so it'll be hard. Dexter understands his reasoning, but all of a sudden he takes back his words, and in an instant, he moves behind Zeke. The protagonist gets no time to react and easily gets knocked out by the Gale Knight. After a while, he finally gains consciousness and still finds it hard to believe that he got knocked out so casually. He guesses Dexter was totally fed up after waiting for a whole week. Zeke observes he's already at the western greenhouse. Dexter asks if he finally woke up. Zeke points out this is clear abduction, but the careless man agrees with him and arrogantly reveals he's interested in our boy. Since he's not even trying to hide it anymore, Zeke assumes he has no patience, but he remains persistent and tries escaping using his swift steps because he believes this isn't the right time. But Dexter appears in front of him, surprising the kid. Zeke tries running away once more but miserably fails because Dexter's able to catch up. Zeke doesn't want to be treated so lightly, so he decides to tease the guy and asks why he looks so interesting to Dexter. The man reminds him about his insane healing capabilities. Zeke smiles and finally understands the cause. He challenges the man to force an answer out of him, so Dexter suddenly disappears. Zeke questions what he's up to, and all of a sudden, a sword almost hits him from behind. But he manages to catch it and wonders what Dexter's hoping to achieve. Zeke takes a fighting stance and questions Dexter's actions, so the mysterious man appears and reminds Zeke that he was challenging the guy first. But that seems boring, so they should make a bet. Dexter challenges him to graze even a single piece of his clothing if he wants his wish granted. But with a terrifying expression, the man demands to know everything Zeke is hiding if he ends up losing the challenge. After 3 whole hours of continuous fighting, Dexter begins to question the kid's tenacity. The guy learns Zeke doesn't just have insane stamina and endurance. He's also capable of limitlessly healing and recovering, making him unstoppable. The protagonist crawls back up, and without wasting a second, he activates his healing skills and infinite stamina, which allows him to keep going all day long. But he admits even such skills won't help him achieve victory, so he recalls his Might of the Dragon skill, which seemed a bit too dangerous, so he never used it. Zeke believes it'll be fine using such a skill against a Black Knight. His gaze instantly changes as he becomes ready to attack once more and continue the fight. Dexter looks at his cold eyes and becomes excited, as this is how a fight should go. Our boy starts emitting a purple aura and activates his swift steps to rush forward so he can land an attack. But Dexter is able to see through his old attacks. He admits the kid is faster than before but remembers he is nothing compared to some of the people he fought in his past. However, he sees the insane spite in the protagonist's eyes, which surpasses any kind of tenacity. The guy falls in love with it and decides to use a bit of his aura, but all of a sudden, our boy activates the might of the dragon and catches him off guard. Dexter manages to break his sword and push him back, but he becomes confused and questions what happened. He uses the dust around him to keep himself hidden, and wonders if Zeke used a technique to somehow block his vision. He doubts our boy can find him with such a thick screen of dust, but with the use of dragon eyes, the protagonist is able to locate his presence and tries attacking from behind. He manages to finally land an attack, but the Black Knight instantly disappears, shocking the protagonist. He believes it's that Duke's secret technique that allows him to move instantly, causing a gust. He finally understands why Dexter is known as the Gale Knight. But while he's contemplating, the man appears behind him, and without much effort, he moves in and calls it a draw before completely wrecking the protagonist and ending the fight. The system shows the built-up fatigue has surpassed the usual limits because of his excessive use of skills, so his consciousness is going to be forcefully shut down for his own safety. Zeke begins losing his vision. He tries getting up but fails to do anything at all. After a few hours, he regains consciousness and finds himself in his own room. Our boy assumes the Duke probably brought him here. He regrets losing but believes this much is expected of the Black Knight. Despite throwing whatever he had, he still lost. Zeke remembers using the same old attack pattern again and again in hopes of throwing his guard down, and then, as soon as he got an opportunity, he instantly changed, using the might of the dragon and his dragon eyes to finally land an attack. But all of his efforts were still not enough. He's sure the skill Dexter used at the end was his secret move. Zeke regrets getting knocked out just because he abused the draconian skills, but he's glad he got to see the man's secret move at least. The absurd speed Dexter used with his incredibly trained body, it is the same move that allowed Andre to achieve such a high rank despite having weak stamina. Zeke regrets losing the opportunity as he wanted to learn it badly, but he still feels somewhat satisfied. He is sure the skill Might of the Dragon, which was able to force even a Black Knight to hesitate, is surely going to wreck any small fries if they're ever exposed to it. Zeke receives a message from the system. He checks everything and learns his swift steps leveled up. His soul was able to develop, and along with that, his system functions are also available now, so he can unlock them anytime using his karma points. He becomes surprised and sees options to unlock a minimap, an inventory, and a quest book with enough karma points. Seeing a bunch of things pop up, Zeke takes his time and understands what he's looking at. He buys the inventory first, so the system helps him understand he can store items in it and pull them out just by thinking about the name or shape. It explains everything, so the protagonist selects his sword as an item to store. Since he can activate it just by a thought, he enchants it, saving it with the sword in his hand. The claymore suddenly vanishes and appears inside the inventory window. He understands the system instructions now and tries thinking about his sword to pull it out. The claymore instantly appears in his hands, exceeding his expectations, as he thought it was just a subspace for storage. He recalls trying to find a good place to store the artifact he had in his past life. He learns he can easily increase the storage as well just by using karma points, and the whole function is just a low-rank administrator skill. The protagonist is surprised and wonders what he's going to unlock once he reaches the high-rank administrator function. He understands karma points are extremely precious, so it's going to be dumb using them without properly thinking. He decides to make a few changes in his plans, but as he's trying to think, Dexter appears and asks for permission to come inside. Zeke gets a bit surprised but lets him in. The butler shares there is a message for our boy. The man said Zeke will understand if he shares it as from the garden keeper Dexter. Our boy smiles and realizes his efforts were not a total waste as he reads the invitation. Dexter assures him to come whenever he's ready to challenge again. He remembers the man called it a draw before wrecking him for this reason. He gets excited since he still has the awesome opportunity. The butler shares another thing, that he managed to locate the blacksmith our boy mentioned. Zeke asks about the appointment, but the butler awkwardly shares it didn't go as planned because the blacksmith refused any appointments. Zeke gets shocked but learns the guy stopped forging weapons now. The next day, Zeke reaches the blacksmith's shop he used to visit in his past life. He finds the name a bit funny and enters the shop. He asks if anyone's inside. In his past life, the protagonist recalls wielding a sword known as the Radiance of Graham. It was a real masterpiece forged by Galleon, who called it a payment in exchange for saving his life. He believes Galleon deserves the grand title Blacksmith of the Soul, because rumors have it that he's able to read the souls of his clients before forging a weapon for them. Zeke remembers that the blacksmith didn't disappoint him in his past life, and forged a weapon with an ability he needed the most. The sword was capable of replacing ether with aura. Galleon used to be the greatest blacksmith on the entire continent, but Zeke feels disappointed finding him in such a drunken state. Galleon notices the kid and orders him to get lost, saying it's not a shop for teens. Zeke is aware the guy had a horrible attitude, but he wasn't expecting this kind of moody temperament. He wonders what happened before Galleon met our boy in his past life. Without hesitation, Zeke throws a bucket of water on the drunk guy. Zeke arrogantly smiles and asks if he finally woke up. He demands an answer for the rejection earlier. Galleon comes back to his senses and recognizes Zeke Draker. He instantly bows down and apologizes for his disrespect. He begins trembling in fear and continues to repeat his apology, but believes a crappy blacksmith like him doubts he's capable of making anything good for others when he can't even make what he himself wants. So he has stopped taking commissions for a while. Zeke is a bit surprised to see even a famous blacksmith like him had a shitty phase. He suddenly recalls the guy was already an incredible blacksmith back when he met Galleon. He never mentioned anything about his life, probably because he felt too embarrassed to share his failures. But Zeke doesn't have time to wait around. Galleon starts going crazy because of his existential crisis, but Zeke snaps him out of it. The insecure guy apologizes for his disrespectful behavior, but Zeke assures him it's nothing and demands to see the weapons he failed to properly forge. While the blacksmith guides him to the back, the protagonist realizes he has no other choice but to help the depressed guy find the right path. As they reach the backyard, Galleon apologizes for the mess, but Zeke assures him not to worry, as it looks cool. Galleon thanks him, so Zeke begins looking around. While he observes the swords, Galleon warns him to be careful because they're all still sharp. Our boy continues checking around and finds out they're not failures at all, but have the same quality as what he used to forge when he was called the best in the entire continent. Zeke's dragon eyes help him see through everything. He notices something and asks the guy if he has any issues with his brazier. Galleon is surprised he knew, but Zeke orders him to just answer. He even points out that the guy goes through smelting using his own methods. He's able to see Galleon mixes multiple kinds of metals to create a lighter but stronger material. But Zeke easily breaks one of his failed swords and calls the durability pathetic. He explains that in such cases, the real issue is that many impurities haven't been properly removed while forging the sword. Galleon feels shocked to see Zeke didn't just see through his whole forging method instantly. He even called out all the major issues and causes with no effort. Galleon gets an idea and calls Zeke. He's sure it might come out as weird, but he wants to make a request. Inside the shop, Zeke asks what he's up to. The blacksmith shows him a blueprint and reveals all the secrets without hesitation. Zeke remembers it's the same blueprint the guy revealed in his past life, known as the blueprint of the magic brazier. Galleon didn't want to hide his secrets from someone who saved his life, so he revealed the blueprint. He does the same this time. Zeke believes the smelting method will become flawless with this. Galleon expected our boy to recognize it, but Zeke wonders why he's not working on it even though he has the blueprint. Galleon explains he's still missing the most important part, but the Magic Tower's commission fee is 10,000 gold coins. Even a normal family only spends 10 golds monthly. It's 10 times more than that. Our boy finally understands why it took him a good 10 years to become successful. He admits the price is totally insane. Galleon knows this is going to sound pretty absurd, but since the protagonist is a Draker and a pure-blooded awakener, he hopes Zeke can help him get his hands on the brazier. In return, he's willing to do any and all commissions for free as long as he is alive. Zeke contemplates and finds the request almost impossible because he's not the family's guardian knight, so there's no way he can gather an absurd amount like that, even as a pure blood. He needs Graham, the Sword of Radiance, so he thinks of a solution. Zeke knows it's an issue regarding the mana energy laws, so all of a sudden, he gets an amazing idea and accepts the request. Zeke takes the blueprint, but Galleon still finds it hard to believe. So, our boy assures him he knows a mage who's willing to help, so he will let Graham know if something works. Before leaving, Zeke orders him to stop drinking, but the guy gets down on his knees and grabs our boy's leg. He bursts into tears and promises to serve the protagonist for his entire life if this works. He continues to show his gratitude while Zeke tries leaving the workshop. At the Draker Academy's professorial research building, Zeke finds it absurd and wonders why the Mage Tower scumbags have the fee so high, even though the task itself looks fairly easy. He remembers Phantom's major was related to this, so he tries recalling the guy's research lab. As he continues to look for it, he notices something happening in an alley. A kid gets his ass wrecked by a few bullies. He tries apologizing with tears in his eyes. The protagonist suddenly recalls the same thing used to happen in his past life. He grits his teeth in frustration and decides to check the alley. Leon calls the poor kid complete trash and continues beating him up. He lets out the frustration and anger he has for Zeke on the poor victim instead. Leon doesn't admit his defeat and calls it all bullshit while he stomps his victim's head onto the ground. Leon thinks his defeat couldn't be helped because of the surprise attack, but he calls it pure luck and doesn't believe Zeke has the right to be called a pure-blooded awakener for it. As soon as Zeke appears and speaks up, Leon's expression instantly changes. The protagonist arrogantly smiles but suddenly becomes serious, and with terrifyingly cold eyes, he orders the bullies to get on their knees if they love their life. Leon calls him out for his arrogance and doubts he actually went through any real pureblood awakening, but the protagonist shuts him up and terrifyingly orders him to bow down, or else he's done. His words send chills down Leon's spine. He becomes scared and starts sweating anxiously, but the bully wonders why he's feeling such insane pressure, even though Zeke was completely insignificant just a few months ago. Leon grits his teeth in anger and frustratingly calls him an inferior guy. He orders his goons to rush and attack the protagonist at once, but Zeke remains unfazed despite seeing a punch coming. He warns them once more and easily dodges the punch. Our boy wrecks the first guy, moves forward, and defeats another. Zeke grabs the kid flying at him and throws him back. With ease, he destroys the whole gang instantly. While watching the whole shit show, Leon sweats anxiously, and it's hard for him to believe this is the same Zeke he knew. The protagonist approaches him and arrogantly assures the wimpy guy not to worry, as it's going to hurt just for a second. Leon pulls out his sword in fear and orders the protagonist to stay away, or else he's going to get injured. Zeke reminds him what it means to pull out a weapon in the training area. The wimp sweats anxiously and becomes speechless, just to save himself from the murderous intent of Leon, who pulled out his sword outside the holy training ground. Zeke announces that he's going to fight back in the name of honor. He pulls out his sword as well and makes it clear that their battle will only end once one of them finally dies. Whoever drew his sword first takes the responsibility for whatever's going to happen, and the opponent is not going to be at fault despite the outcome. Zeke turns Liam, the beat-up goon, into their witness and then starts the fight, but the wimpy bully stops him and apologizes. Leon pisses his pants as well and begs the protagonist to let him go this once. Our boy recalls what happened in his past life, so he calls Leon a trashy scumbag and, in a flash, cuts the bully's ear as payment for what he did. Leon starts screaming in pain, but the merciless protagonist warns him to never attach it back, or else he's going to get his head chopped off the next time they encounter each other. The victim calls Zeke and asks why he went out of his way to save the guy. Our boy brushes it off since he wasn't helping anyone. He was just helping himself. While leaving, he wonders if Galleon made him change, as he almost said something embarrassing. He finally finds the professor and asks if it's doable. Phantom gives him a straightforward answer and reveals it's possible. Zeke leaves it up to him, but the guy stops our boy and requests him to properly listen to what he has to say. Phantom explains the overall composition is not hard, but the real issue is its core that's required for power output. The core is said to be the heart of the machine, but since this circuit has a lot of weird restrictions, it might look small but needs a lot of energy. They also have to manipulate the output on time. Zeke understands everything and asks if there's a way to make it. The professor explains they have two options. He can maybe make a few changes in the design because of the core's condition, but he disappointingly mentions such a task is going to take a whole decade or maybe 15 years. Zeke is shocked by this, but the professor repeats it's going to take an insane amount of time. He continues and explains the second method will help them completely avoid redoing the core's design by just using a different material. He admits this method will help them save so much time, but the material they need for it is a high-compression mana stone. Zeke finds it absurd and gets up as soon as he hears about it. He remembers it's an insanely rare ancient artifact that no one can replicate even with modern technology. Phantom calls him correct and reminds him finding such materials in a ruin is even harder. To get their hands on a stone that will work with their original design, it's going to cost them 3,000 gold. Zeke becomes speechless at first. His frustration is expected, as he might get kicked out if someone catches on and learns he's not an aura user. 15 years is just too long, but he scratches his head and admits he can't manage 3,000 gold coins either. It's hard for him to admit defeat and just forget about the blacksmith. Almost everyone believes he's capable of using aura because of the event during the blessing rite, but the truth is, it was just a fake reaction he was able to show using his ether and healing abilities. He still can't change the fact that he's not capable of using aura. Ether is a power normal humans can't control. Besides the skill Spirit of the Soul, he can't use any sword skills that involve aura. But even with that skill, the only thing he can manage is reinforcing the sword and swinging it around. Compared to Ether, Aura is a lot easier to use, so he has to somehow get his hands on Gram, the Sword of Radiance. Zeke remains frustrated and keeps thinking about the Mana Stone to somehow find a solution. Phantom expresses his astonishment and believes whoever came up with the blueprints is probably incredible. He calls it an efficient design and believes even among the Golden Age relics, it's rare for someone to create this. Zeke listens to his words and suddenly gets an idea. He gets up and orders the professor to handle the design until he comes back. The confused professor asks if Zeke wants him to redo the design and spend 15 years of his life, but Zeke clarifies he's going to bring one. He confidently shares he knows how to get his hands on a high-compression mana stone. The Golden Age, the Liberation War began so humanity could finally escape the rule of dragons. It ended once the evil dragon Bahamut died by the hands of Terrakan Draker. Humanity finally got peace for a whole century, but during that time, the ancient relics discovered inside the dragon's lair became the remnants of the Age of the Hero King, the prime age of magic. All of these relics surpassed whatever humans could create. Among them was the high-compression mana stone. It had enough energy to sustain a whole village's mana needs easily, a relic from the hero's era. Our boy reaches the Draker Academy Central Library. Even though no one uses it anymore, the Central Library is still being maintained because everyone believes the hero Terrakan Draker established it himself. Decades ago, when the record rooms were being expanded, multiple relics from the Golden Age were discovered. The Magic Tower and the Archmage of Nirvana didn't waste any time getting involved. During those months, many relics from the hero's era were found, and rumors about them spread through the whole continent instantly. Zeke remembers that's what happened in his past life. He enters the library and believes the relics still haven't been discovered by anyone. He can try all day but doubts he'll find them so easily, so he uses his dragon eyes and roams through the whole library. He finally notices a weird tile, so he taps it to confirm if something's behind it or not. He enables the soul of the spirit and remembers it's the only use for ether his master taught him. Ether is capable of materializing, so the user can apply any kind of properties like cut to use it in different situations. It still has a lot of cons and drawbacks. Ether can't be used unless the user expends a large amount of it to do anything at all. He starts feeling fatigued right after using the technique, but without wasting any time, he enters through the tile. Inside a cave, he lights a fire and remembers the news in his past life never mentioned it was this deep. He suddenly hears something, even though he remembers the ruins were discovered at least a decade later. He wonders if someone already uncovered it, but he takes a peek and notices skeletons with shovels and pickaxes in their hands. He uses his dragon eye to confirm they're not made by a lich, so he decides to enable critical strike and instantly moves forward to destroy them. He receives 2 karma points for defeating them. Zeke smiles and guesses he completely forgot about karma points because he was too focused on getting his hands on the artifact. He suddenly makes a wicked face and believes it is the perfect opportunity to farm karma points. He continues moving forward and wrecks 20 more skeletons for karma points. The system shows all the options he has, so he decides to look through whatever he can buy. After seeing the karma point requirements, he learns that besides a mini-map, nothing's affordable right now, so he quickly buys it. The system shows him his exact location. He finds it similar to a magic map. Something catches his attention, so he wonders what it is. The mini-map becomes 3D instantly. Zeke is amazed by it, but finds out only a single room has a different color. The system shows it's a storage room, so if he says yes, it'll provide directions for it. Zeke is shocked as he remembers the search party took multiple days to find the storage room, but he was able to discover it without any effort. The system gives him the best route for it, which is hard for Zeke to believe, as there's no way he will get lost with such a useful skill. He finally reaches his destination but finds a huge door in front of him. He wonders what he's supposed to do now since the door is not going to open up with just a simple push. He tries it anyway, but a weird magic repels his hand. He guesses this is why the Archmage of Nirvana and the Magic Tower were involved. He looks at his burning glove and believes he would have lost a hand back there. He doubts he can open it, so he asks the system. It replies and connects with the security device because of his request. The system tries but fails, so it activates the manual device instead. Zeke gets shocked and asks to confirm if it really just replied back. The system answers positively, which leaves him stunned. He decides to use it and demands an answer for why he got regressed. The system has nothing to say, so he questions the administrator system. The system has no answer again, so he throws another question and asks who developed the system. He gets no answer once more, so he becomes frustrated and gives up. Zeke orders it to just open the door, so the system confirms his request and opens the door of the Dragonslayer's storage room. Zeke feels astonished as soon as he lays eyes on the chests inside the room. Just like what happened in his past life, all the chests are filled with valuable relics and treasures. Obtaining any of them in ruins is nothing more than a miracle. He goes through all the chests and finally finds the compression mana stones. He finds 4, so he uses a karma point to expand his inventory and keep one. He doesn't have enough storage, so Zeke decides to someday return once he can take everything with him. He thinks it's enough, but as soon as he's about to leave, our protagonist gets a weird, ominous feeling. So he looks back and, out of nowhere, multiple magic circles appear around him and teleport him somewhere else. The magic circle that suddenly surrounded Zeke Draker's body made him falter. Upon opening his eyes, he noticed that his surroundings had changed. So he hurriedly asked the system where he was. It promptly replied that he was currently in the home of the Dragonslayer. In his past life, he had never heard of such a room filled with coffins in the newsletter. Opening the minimap, he discovered that he was not far from the previous room he was in. But no matter how he looks at it, there isn't any path connecting to the home of the Dragonslayer. If that's the case, there's a strong possibility that this is a hidden area that's never been discovered or documented before. Deciding to make the most of the bizarre situation, he ran to one of the coffins and opened its concrete lid. Lying inside was a medieval armor laid to rest. According to the system, it's a Dragonslayer exclusive equipment. Zeke grabbed the armor and noticed the wear and tear all over its surface. Upon closer inspection, he determined that this Dragonslayer equipment is different from armors hailing from the Golden Age. On its back, he found some sort of circular hole. Connecting the dots, he reckoned that this hole must be connected to the loot he just retrieved a minute ago. Zeke accessed his storage and summoned one of the high-compression mana stones. He can't afford to let such an interesting opportunity pass by. As soon as he inserted the ancient relic, the system notified him of the successful installation of the mana battery in the Dragonslayer equipment. The entire armor set lit up as it activates. Seeing this, Zeke smiled in anticipation. This discovery could be huge. A second later, the armor started tweaking out like a crackhead. His optimistic anticipation quickly turned to frightened surprise. The whole armor set exploded, filling the room with smoke. According to the system, an overload caused an equipment failure, stopping the activation. It even warned him of the imminent explosion, but the warning was a tad bit too slow. The system apologized for the late notice. Thankfully, it didn't cause much harm. At least he had confirmed that the high-compression mana stones were the energy source for these ancient armors. He could not help but wonder just what sort of features this armor had to require such a large-capacity energy source. Zeke made a mental note to ask Professor Fannin about the matter as soon as he got out. For now, he decided to roam around the strange room to keep searching. Aside from the room filled with strange coffins, the other rooms were empty. Eventually, he reached the last room. Like the ones that he searched for beforehand, it was a huge and empty space. That was until he saw a glass cube situated in the middle of the room. A system prompt appeared before his eyes, and his eyes almost bulged out of their sockets. He started sweating. All he can think of is how batshit crazy Terracan Draker really was. The cube in the last room was none other than the Founder's legacy. It is the heart of the cursed light dragon, Bahamut. Who would have thought that his ancestor would leave the heart of the dragon he had slain as a dying gift to his descendants? This certainly explains the ominous feeling Zeke felt when he entered the storage room. But compared to the dark presence from before, the heart of Bahamut is emitting something different. As soon as the system informed him that the heart of the cursed light dragon was reacting to his presence, Zeke felt the dark presence surround him. He heard a voice inside his head, a voice filled with vitriol telling him that he had no other choice. A voice screaming that he should kill them all. Before his mind was totally consumed by the dark presence, his indomitable mental defense kicked in. Snapping out of the brief trance, he felt a sharp pain in his head. For a brief moment, something overtook his mind. Its presence still lingered in his body, turning one of his eyes pitch black. Feeling the gravity of the situation, he felt fearful of the cube housing the dragon's heart. Still reeling from almost getting possessed, the system gave him an urgent quest called Terracan Draker's Test. He must defeat the strong curse ingrained in Bahamut's heart. The dark presence flared up once more, and when his indomitable mental defense tried to cleanse the effects, the reliable class skills activation failed for the first time. With that, the overpowering murderous thoughts consumed his brain. The voice telling him to kill them all became louder and more powerful than ever. Both of his eyes turned black as the voice demanded to be accepted. If he does accept, it promises that he will be free. Through sheer willpower, Zeke regained a semblance of control and smashed his head against the glass cube as hard as he could. The pain allowed him to clear his mind. He smiled as blood dripped all over his face. Zeke is not a fan of that annoying and murderous mumbling at all. This dumbass voice swore to give him freedom, but he firmly believes that freedom is not given. Freedom is won. The glass cube shattered into a million pieces as he successfully overcomes the Light Dragon's curse, completing the urgent quest. As a reward, he has been granted ownership over Terracan Draker's dying gift. The mental fatigue quickly caught up with him. If he didn't have the willpower after his skill failed, the situation could have been a lot worse. His body sensed the damage and triggered his healing factor and infinite stamina to recover. With that, the absorption process for the heart of the cursed light dragon, Bahamut, has started. He looked up to see the heart shining with vigorous light as it floated over to his chest. A domineering power filled his flesh and bones, causing unimaginable agony. As far as he can tell, a pure and dense source of mana he had never encountered before is starting to flow into every cell in his body. This is bad news for someone like him who doesn't have a single circle to properly accept such an intense torrent of mana. Without a place to be stored, All that mana is overwhelming and destroying his body in the most unbearable manner. Zeke knows he has to do something, anything, or this process could be his end. With a skillful sleight of hand, he summoned the purple ether. Using the spirit of the soul, he created a mini black hole to seal the unimaginable quantity of mana. With an extremely limited array of skills in his arsenal, he reckoned that using ether was his only hope. Zeke gritted his teeth as he poured all of his concentration to maintain the ether hole seal in his hands. This eventually caused a massive explosion of magic. With him as the epicenter, the entire room was filled with thundering smoke. The explosion opened a massive crater. Fortunately, Zeke is still in one piece. All the nerve endings in his body are screaming with torturous pain. As soon as the pain started subsiding, he sighed in relief. It was tough, but he managed to make it out alive. His uniform was torn up, and on his chest appeared the mark of Bahamut. The heart inside the shattered glass cube had vanished. Bahamut's mana was no joke. It's a miracle that he survived, thanks to his quick thinking. From the shattered remains of the cube, he saw the reflection of the mark on his chest. It seems like the sealing of Bahamut's rampaging mana yielded some surprising results. Finally, the system notified him of the successful absorption of the cursed light dragon's heart. The absorbed mana has drastically changed his body. His constitution has been changed from ordinary to divine. Upon detection of a power that he can't control as of yet, the system compressed and sealed 95% of its force. As the inheritor of the ancestor's legacy, he has obtained the right to open Draker's secure library. The beginner quest book has been unlocked, along with the tutorial for the low-level administrator. Zeke scratched his head. A divine body, Terrakin's library, some sort of tutorial. He has no clue what the hell all these things are. Still confused, he dismissed all the prompts except for one. It looks like the first Dragonslayer was feeling generous in his deathbed all those centuries ago. A prompt asking him if he would like to open Draker's other dying gift appeared before his eyes. Just when he thought he couldn't be more surprised, Zeke finally laid his eyes upon Terrakin's second gift. Upon finishing his brush with death in that forsaken room, Zeke made his way back to the Platinum Mansion. He stored the treasures he looted in a secure spot while his eyes were fixated on the system prompt in front of him. His title has changed to the one who received the blessing of the ancient dragon, the inheritor of Draker. He gained the authority of dragon control and the divine body constitution. Among the new additions in his arsenal, he was most curious about the draconian skill called incantation. This locked skill will fill his words with power. He gained a lot after that close call with the afterlife, but he's still too weak to fully utilize some of the rewards. Draconic control gives him control over Dragonkin. Dragons under his control can be summoned and will follow his orders unconditionally. As for the divine body, it will allow him to perform at the highest level. His rate of learning for combat and the transfer rate of ether within his body have increased. The descriptions aren't really helping him grasp the whole picture, so maybe some practical tests would. Aside from the ancestor's second dying gift, there's another window related to Terrakin. While he has been granted access to Draker's secure library, an information update is still needed. As helpful as ever, the system offered to mark the location where he could obtain the update on his minimap. Zeke is not happy with the extra work, but it can't be helped. Much to his surprise, he recognized the location marked on his minimap. From the appearance of the layout, it looked like Valhalla. You see, Valhalla is the most prestigious knight training institution out there. Individuals other than administrators are unable to view, let alone enter, that area. As he is right now, even Zeke would have trouble entering such a place. To make matters worse, he wasn't even planning on joining the institution in this life. But if something related to Terrakin's dying gift can be found there, it might be worth adjusting his plans. It seems like fate is pushing him to keep being a part of this damned family. The next thing he parsed through is the beginner quest book. The tutorial for low-level administrators will soon start. Upon completion, he will be given a quest to boost his growth. With quests come rewards. Zeke likened this quest system to the missions from an adventurer's guild or mercenary assignments. Curious, he asked the system what the tutorial entailed. Without giving him any time to respond, the start of the quest was automatically triggered. His surroundings started to shift. It was as if reality itself was changing before his eyes. A few seconds later, he found himself in what appeared to be a separate dimension. Grid lines appeared below his feet, and endless darkness surrounded him. The young man remained calm. He looked around to get an idea of where he was. It seems like he has been teleported like before. Being transported against his will twice in a day is crazy. But it feels a little different this time. Instead of a physical plane, it feels like the entire area has shifted. It's like he was rendered in a completely different dimension. Without warning, he felt a hostile presence charging from behind. Turning around, he saw orcs lunging at him with their spiked clubs. Finally, the system explained that for the tutorial quest, he must defeat the monsters within 60 minutes using 2 or more different skills. Upon completion, he will be rewarded with points and system store unlock. While still in thought, his battle senses kicked in, and a sword materialized in his hand. It seems like this tutorial is creating situations where he can take advantage of the system. It would have been nice if he had this feature before. As 3 orcs swung at him from 3 different angles, Zeke vanished in an instant. The attacks caused the entire tutorial area to ripple. With quick succession, he activated swift steps and continuous slash to evade and counter appropriately. These types of monsters are no longer a threat to him. He can simply dice their body up without exerting much effort. He noticed that the claymore he'd been using felt light as a feather. This boost in raw strength must be one of the effects of having a divine body constitution. He reckoned that with a stronger physical form, he should be able to easily defeat a purple knight now. After one-shotting the tutorial orcs, he returned to where he was before as the separate dimension dissipated. He wondered if that was just an illusion, even though it felt incredibly real. Aside from the completion of the tutorial, he gained a critical bonus and a time bonus. All in all, his quest reward amounted to an easy 40-point gain and access to the shop category. He was extremely pleased to find out that he can now buy items through the system. Zeke hurriedly opened the shop tab and saw a bunch of amazing items for sale. Among the wares were the giant's flesh, the breath of a flame giant, and many more. Every item listed is a rare relic that costs a fortune to buy in the market. Maybe he can use this tab to make a killing by reselling the items. Aside from buying, he can also sell items in his possession within the inventory. His training claymore can't be sold, but the elven dagger is priced at 4 points. By the looks of it, the shop only accepts ancient relics. His elven dagger can be sold for an easy 100 gold pieces in an auction, yet it's only worth 4 points for the system. He decided to not sell anything unless he's really desperate for points. With that, he exited his personal training room to call it a day. A lot has happened within the past 24 hours, so it looks like he'll get a good night's sleep tonight. The very next day, Zeke headed for the Draker Academy's research center to meet Professor Fannin. The magic professor couldn't believe that this kid really managed to find a high-compression mana stone within a single day. When asked how he obtained the stone, Zeke refused to explain as it would be too complicated to do so. He hadn't even finished the tea in his cup, and Professor Fannin had already finished tweaking the power source. The magic nerd really is incredible at his job. Even if the professor tried to hide it, Zeke could sense that he was feeling suspicious. Every time a high-compression mana stone is found within the continent, they are registered in a variety of ancient texts. It's used to keep track and manage the ownership of such expensive mana stones. By checking the registration number, the current owner and the location where it was found can be determined. However, the mana stones in Zeke's possession are unregistered. No matter how hard you look, it won't be listed on the Central Continent's registration encyclopedia. Professor Fannin's valid skepticism instead of blind belief is valuable. His judgment and skill are the real deal. Zeke reckoned that such a talented person should not rot in a place where he won't be recognized. Finally, the professor tried activating the design, leading us back to Peperless's breath. Upon completing the design, they handed the apparatus to the blacksmith of the soul, Galleon Halbert. Zeke and Professor Fannin watched the master blacksmith at work. His workshop shined with various intricately constructed magic circles. The look of pure joy on Galleon's face now that he can finally realize his dream of making weapons up to his standards has come true is infectious. Zeke and Fannin are witnessing history in the making. After the successful demonstration, Professor Fannin bade them farewell to attend a lecture. Galleon is filled with gratitude for Zeke's help. He thought he would never get to see a completed magic brazier in his lifetime, but making a deal with the young man was the best thing he had ever done. Since Zeke lived up to his part of the agreement, it's time for Galleon to do the same for him. Of course, the blacksmith is eager to return the favor. Zeke pulled a material out of his bag and presented it to Galleon. One look and the blacksmith immediately knew what he was holding. Inside the lavish case was a dragon's fang. Among the many rewards of inheriting Tarakan's will is Bahamut's sharpest fang. The blacksmithing maniac salivated at the sight of such a big dragon's fang in pristine condition. Tarakan Draker's second dying gift really was the perfect reward. From the heart to the fangs, that ancestor of his must have really loved collecting priceless stuff. Suddenly, Galleon started trembling. Tears and snot flowed down his face, confusing Zeke. He made the magic brazier a reality, and now he's giving this humble craftsman a chance to forge a weapon made with dragon's fang. Galleon vowed to thank him by making a weapon that would exceed his every expectation. The blacksmith of the soul swore upon his name to create a blade worthy of Zeke, even if it cost his life. Those words were oddly familiar. It was the same vow he had sworn upon in the previous life. Even at Zeke's second chance in life, Galleon is still the same sincere idiot. That fact made Zeke a little emotional inside. Exiting Peperless's breath and leaving the crafting to the expert, Zeke looked forward to what blade Galleon would forge for him. With the best blacksmith in the continent cooking, he'll surely get something out of this world. After the trip at the forge, Zeke headed straight to his room in the Platinum Mansion. He went through a lot just to secure a weapon, and now he can finally chill. It had been a week since his duel with Duke when he received the note saying he should swing by again for round 2. Just as he was thinking that the unhinged gardener would inevitably do something sooner or later, he felt a familiar presence sneak into his room. Standing behind him was Duke Draker, and he looked pissed that Zeke did not take up his invitation. The eccentric knight looked at him with rage, asking for an explanation while emanating blatant bloodlust. By the looks of it, he really wants to kill Zeke right now. Deciding to play with the old knight's emotions, he insisted that he had no intentions of challenging him again. Duke Draker closed the distance between the two of them in a split second and demanded to hear the truth. Zeke struggled to free himself from Duke's grasp. Before he could make a move, the crazy bastard threw him out of the open window. Caught off guard, Zeke felt his body falling victim to gravity. His room is situated on the higher floors of the mansion, so falling was undoubtedly dangerous. At this height, he might just die before his passive heal could kick in. Panicking, he tried to grab onto the edge of the balcony. Before he could grab hold of the ledge, Duke's hand gripped him by the throat with excessive force. The old knight refuses to believe that the kid does not know what he really meant by that letter. Zeke kept on avoiding him on purpose. First in the treatment room, and this time too. It's almost as if he's deliberately irritating Duke. When he was done with his games, Duke gave him 5 seconds to spill the beans and tell the truth instead of horsing around. Zeke smiled and argued that Duke hadn't even revealed his true identity to him, still insisting that he was just a gardener. Yet here he is, demanding honesty. As soon as he saw the absence of fear in the young man's eyes despite the countdown, Gardenkeeper Dexter loosened his grip and smiled. The old knight threw him back inside the room like a rag doll bouncing on the floor. It wrecked the room, but Zeke's sturdy body didn't sustain any serious damage. Gardenkeeper Dexter admitted that Zeke had a point. He offered his hand to help the young man get back up and confessed that he was once a Black Knight of Draker. Zeke feigned surprise even though he already knew the man's identity from putting together the information he had been previously given. He started acting his ass off and wholeheartedly apologized for disrespecting an esteemed member of the family and an honorable Black Knight. Still skeptical, Duke asked if this was Zeke's plan all along. The young man continued to shamelessly play dumb. Taking advantage of this rare chance, Zeke asked why Lord Duke calls himself a former Black Knight. Refusing to elaborate, the old knight just asserted that he no longer carries the title. While it's common knowledge that one can rise through the ranks, Zeke didn't know that one could drop down too. Still refusing to play along with his incessant questions, Duke put his foot down and changed the topic. Zeke noticed the old knight's trembling hand and dropped his personal inquiries. Since Lord Duke was honest enough to reveal his real identity, Zeke decided to also share the truth. He got on his knees and confessed that he already knew of Duke's identity, and that he was deliberately trying to bother Duke to become an official apprentice. Surprisingly, the old knight smiled, seemingly amused by the young man's boldness. For that, the Gale Knight finally decided to accept him as an official apprentice. Zeke was shocked that securing a powerful teacher would be that easy. He thought he would have to go through more hoops. He reckoned that he better accept the offer before this fickle old man changes his mind. Resolutely bowing before Duke Draker, he formally stated his intention to become an apprentice to the Knight of Knights. He swore to bring honor upon his master's name, to follow his master's orders to gain wisdom and power. Duke was quite surprised that the kid knew of the apprentice's vow, which most of the new generation had forgotten. Zeke added that culture is a necessary virtue of a knight. However, he wanted to ask his new master one more thing. Duke is not comfortable being called a master, but he honored the kid's request. Zeke then asked what made Duke accept him as an apprentice when he was notorious for not accepting any students. Only Andre, the genius of the century, became this old man's apprentice after years of asking and pleading. Though Zeke has a general idea of why, he still wants to hear it through Duke's own words. He reckoned that the old knight must have seen a potential that surpassed that of Andre during their duel. Duke smiled and asked him to take a guess. Zeke candidly answered that he was accepted for being a genius of the family. Duke just laughed at his confidently wrong answer. If he was picking an apprentice based on raw potential, Duke would have chosen that girl from the Tarun family. But he picked Zeke purely based on his tenacity. Talent is not the only thing a person needs to reach the level of red or even black knights. In reality, talented individuals rarely face any serious issues in their lives. As a result, most of them easily fall in the face of adversity, snuffing out their talent and life in the process. After living through a whole lifetime of hard work and adversity, Zeke could not agree more. Most praised geniuses who were projected to reach the level of a red knight not only fail to reach the expectations put on them, but most of them get stuck at the level of blue knights. After answering, Duke stood up and put a stop to their chit-chat. Right now, he wants to take his new apprentice for his first lesson. The two made their way to the empty western greenhouse gymnasium. Zeke didn't even know that there was a gym underneath the greenhouse. Duke simply ordered him to run around the track, and he's been racking his brain to figure out what his new master has been planning ever since. 3 hours have elapsed since he started, and Duke just continues to observe him wordlessly. Finally, Duke yelled at him to stop and threw him a question. Zeke gladly stopped his jog and asked what his master wanted to know. Before he could react, Duke's hulking body had already appeared behind him. The old knight's hand aimed for Zeke's arm, and the young man instinctively reacted to parry the grab. His battle sense kicked in, and every fiber of his being made him retreat to a safe distance. Duke failed to grab hold of his hands and arm, but the brief moment of contact nearly ruined his special glove. The old knight asked his student if he had a problem with pulse checking. Zeke knew damn well that this sly old bat wasn't just planning to check his pulse. Duke knew something was off with this kid right from the very start. When they fought in the infirmary, when they dueled in the greenhouse, and even after running around the track for 500 laps, Duke did not sense a single drop of aura from the boy's body. He even reacted suspiciously as soon as Duke got close to his wrist. So, the former Black Knight outrightly asked Zeke if he was incapable of using aura. The question prodding at his biggest secret shook Zeke to the bone. Duke had done his research. He saw the bronze statue. He was also aware of the uproar over the never-before-seen golden light that Zeke triggered. If he was wrong in his assumption, then he demanded that Zeke let him examine his pulse. He looked his master in the eye and did not see malicious suspicion, just simple and raw curiosity. Despite the serious scandal that might erupt at the news of a Draker who can't use aura, it seems like Duke's curiosity comes first. Zeke is lucky that Duke is an eccentric bastard. He's still banking on getting his hands on his blade gram to avoid any suspicions about his aura. This is a wake-up call, and he must be more cautious until then. He steeled his resolve. There's no need for him spin lies. Unlike his past life, where he was the first failed awakener in his family, things are different now. Zeke carefully removed the special gloves, stripping the symbol of a pure-blood awakener. He demonstrated his mana reflection, proof that his pure-blooded nature is legitimate. But for unknown reasons, he just can't use aura. Zeke is hoping that sharing truths will cover up his other lies. Still, he apologized to Duke. If it's discovered that a Draker cannot use aura, he's afraid that he'll be chased out of the family. Bro can make himself cry on command and look like a scared little puppy. Give this man an award. Zeke then offered his pulse to be examined, and Duke went ahead and carefully spread his aura inside his apprentice's body. Seeing Zeke cry and look frightened, Duke reckoned that a child is still a child even if this child is holding malak unbefitting of his age. Just as he expected, not a single drop of aura can be detected in the boy's entire body, despite awakening successfully. Duke was stumped. He racked his brain for an answer that wouldn't come. Zeke already expected skepticism even after the pulse examination. That's how absolute the results of the blessing rite are for a Draker. Even if it's true that he cannot awaken to aura, Duke will undoubtedly find a reason to explain the phenomenon, to rationalize, and to deny the evidence in front of him. The old knight labeled him an irregular. Of course, that's his conclusion. People who are not aware of the concept of classes tend to think that way. Still, he played along and asked Duke what an irregular is. His master explained that it refers to people with anomalous abilities. For example, some people have the ability to use aura and mana together. There are also irrational abilities, such as peering into the future. As such, irregulars are not treated very well at all, so it would be better if they kept this secret between master and apprentice. As for his irregular ability, Duke posited that it's his insane stamina and recovery. However, like the damage, healing from an internal would take time. However, that immutable concept does not apply to Zeke. He recovered from serious damages almost instantly before. Duke reckoned that such a fast recovery must have consumed an unspeakable amount of energy. That energy is aura. The old knight hypothesized that because Zeke's aura is being constantly consumed in exchange for stamina and regeneration, there's barely any left to sense and use. Zeke was surprised that this old man churned out a plausible explanation. Keeping up the act, he innocently asked if he would never be able to use aura, afraid that he'd fail to meet his master's expectations. Duke just laughed at such a sentiment and told him not to worry. That's because his Gale Arts is a special and potent art that does not use aura at all. He elaborated that a special art is a special technique personally developed by a knight after reaching the peak. Normally, it's an application or specialization of dragon-slaying arts, thus requiring proper use of aura. But as Gale Arts place paramount importance in training the body, Duke wanted to give his students a demonstration, so he asked Zeke to watch closely. Suddenly, the floor he was standing on cracked under the force of a simple jump. Zeke tried his best to keep track of Duke's insane speed. In a span of a few seconds, the Gale Knight roamed around the arena, and with how fast he was going, even his afterimages were invisible to the naked eye. He then casually landed back at the spot where he started. He didn't even break a sweat. When asked if he saw the movements, Zeke asked if it would be okay if he tried it himself. Taken aback, Duke asked the kid if he didn't want to see it again. The eccentric old man laughed and praised Zeke's confidence reminiscent of a black knight and allowed the kid to give it a go. Zeke stepped up and assumed the position. He visualized and replayed the movement that his master had demonstrated just now. His first step left a crater right on top of the Black Knight's footprint. After seeing the technique demonstrated once, he perfectly recreated Duke's movement pattern by following the prince. Now that he's directly mimicking his master's movements and trajectory, he's starting to see things he couldn't before. It's clear that these steps were taken as if he was sparring against someone. Some patterns indicated attacking, dodging, closing distance, and creating distance. Each and every step has their specific purpose. With the final position filled, Zeke steadily decelerated. Duke could not believe his eyes. He knew that the kid was gifted a week ago, but he wasn't nearly this good. What the hell could have possibly happened in the span of a week for such a huge jump in potential? The difference is like heaven and earth. Duke had never seen anything like it. He had never encountered such a perfect prospect. But Zeke had to turn around and ruin it by acting arrogantly. If he could just keep that in check, he would be perfect. Duke playfully grabbed him in a headlock and teased him for crying his eyes out, then busting out a near-perfect replication of such a difficult technique. Time passed since Duke started training him. Today Zeke can be seen in the academy dining hall. On his plate was a hodgepodge of meat, seafood, bread, and everything he could get his hands on. It's been a month since he became the Gale Knight's apprentice. With his continuous training, his appetite just keeps on increasing. Today, his lunch was interrupted by instructor Andre himself asking if he could spare some time to talk. Because he has a packed schedule, he asked Andre to just get on with what he wanted to talk about right here and right now. Andre had a simple question for him. He wanted to know how Zeke convinced Sir Dexter. Since Andre hasn't become Duke's official disciple yet at this point in time, the news that Zeke has been accepted as one likely made him a bit anxious. Continuing to stuff his face with food, Zeke answered that he didn't really do anything special, that Sir Dexter just picked him out on his own. Andre was obviously irritated by such an answer. Andre looked at him with unconcealed disgust and hatred. He jumped to the conclusion that Zeke was picked to be a disciple based on the sole merit that he's a pureblood awakener. Our boy did not like the sound of that allegation at all. He finished his meal and gave the genius of the century a stinging reality check. Zeke pointed out Andre's severe inferiority complex, which the instructor did not like at all. His arms started trembling out of anger. He referred to Zeke as a cadet, hoping to put him in place, but the young man is not done spitting his piece yet. He asked Andre if he believed that Sir Dexter was the type of man who would pick a disciple for such a simplistic reason. Zeke asserted that the fact that he was able to leverage his bloodline as a foundation to become a disciple is a testament to his own abilities. He then gave Andre some valuable advice. Instead of wasting his time patting his ego with that severe inferiority complex, perhaps he should put in some effort in order to be chosen too. As incensed as he was, Andre knew that there were some merits to the cadet's sobering words. Later that day, in the Western Greenhouse Arena, there were 3 people instead of the usual 2. Someone arrived before Zeke and Duke and is running around the track like his life depended on it. Zeke asks his master what's going on, but the Gale Knight is confused too. He doesn't know what got into instructor Andre, but he came begging him, saying he's fine with being a servant if it means he can stay by Duke's side to learn. The old knight jokingly agreed to take him in if he could run 300 laps without aura, which is how poor Andre ended up like this. Duke was surprised at Andre's newfound tenacity. Similarly, Zeke was pleasantly amazed to see that this guy wasn't just some self-righteous nerd. As it turns out, the genius of the century has quite the backbone on him. Every student of the academy has been summoned to show up and line up on the field. Today is a special day. It's the day of the Patriarch's visit. The strong strides of stallions rumbled outside the campus. A lavish carriage carrying the Draker family's insignia enters. The lookout hurriedly informed everyone of the Patriarch's arrival. The fat-ass dean of the academy, Howard Draker, tasked his men to get ready to receive their supreme leader. He waited in front of the gate, making sure that he was the first one that the VIP would see. As soon as the Patriarch got out of the carriage, Howard's pudgy face greeted him. With a deep bow, the dean paid his respects to the master of the Drakers. The knights followed suit, raising their blades and kneeling on their knees according to rank to demonstrate respect. The Patriarch arrived at precisely 12 noon, and the Academy's bell rang louder for today's rare occasion. Master Draker walked with unmatched aura and drip. His mere presence commanded obedience from everyone else. He held Howard's shoulder, towering over the dean, and praised him for his hard work. This absolute giga-chad is Arthur Draker, 3rd Transcendent Household's leader, the Dragonslayer Draker's Patriarch. Howard proposed that they go inside right away given how harsh the sun is today, but Arthur prefers to move at his own pace. Some of the students near the gate caught a glimpse of the Patriarch's silhouette near the gates and were awestruck. Finally, Arthur Draker stepped into the light, showing his face to the students of the academy. He addressed the young Dragonslayers lined up before him, the hope and future of his clan. He urged them to train hard and train more for their development, which will be the family's development. Inspired by his encouraging words and domineering presence, the students committed his simple speech to their hearts and replied with their whole chests. As the sun beamed down brighter, Arthur turned around and ordered Howard to escort him in. Behind closed doors, Zeke was called to greet the leader of all knights, the guardian of the Dragonslayer's name, and his father. Arthur laughed at his overly grand and old-fashioned greeting, a rare occurrence nowadays. After fetching 2 cups of tea, Arthur asked his son to have a seat. He heard that his son likes tea, so he prepared something rare, hoping it would be to Zeke's liking. While this seems like a sweet gesture of a father, Zeke only saw it as his every move down to his preferences being reported back to the higher-ups. There is a saying that there may be things that the Emperor doesn't know, but there will never be anything that a Draker does not. Zeke can feel the truth of that saying right now. Arthur admitted that he called for Zeke after hearing that Duke took him in as a disciple. As expected, the patriarch is not one to dilly-dally. He prefers getting straight to the point. Zeke downplayed the whole thing, insisting that Duke is doing him a great favor. While Arthur is not sure of his son's goal, continuing to follow Duke's teachings should paint a bright future. Zeke cut his father off and asserted that his goal was to become the strongest man on the continent. Hearing such a lofty goal sparked some sharpness in Arthur's eyes. Zeke added that he will become stronger than everyone else so that he can live just as freely. That is his goal, and he will do everything to get there. He looked at his father's face, unable to interpret how the patriarch was feeling. Arthur deliberately leaked some of his aura and bloodlust. If his youngest plans to become the strongest, that means he is aiming to surpass even his father. Zeke realized that he might have made a mistake. He was way too enthusiastic to blurt out such sentiments. He felt a palpable chill running down his spine. Swirling around the room is the presence of Astral Sword. It is said to give the user power over all living beings within its effective radius. It is widely regarded as the pinnacle of aura usage that only full-on Black Knights can reach. Arthur looked at his youngest son, a hint of amusement visible in his eyes. Zeke chose to stand on his ground and doubled down on his goal. He admitted that he plans to surpass even his all-powerful father while trying his best to resist the Astral Sword. Hearing his resolve, the patriarch seemed pleased with his will. Arthur quietly dispelled his Astral Sword while calmly sipping his tea, lifting the pressure from Zeke's body. He admitted that what Zeke said just now was the most interesting thing he had heard in ages. Arthur actually came to this place to support both the academy and his youngest son. But now that he's seen how much Zeke had grown, maybe that won't be enough. He rummaged inside his intricate suit to retrieve something. Zeke thought that other Black Knights like Duke were already at the pinnacle, someone impossibly strong. But his father was on a whole other level. Arthur slid a black card across the table. The card bears the Draker insignia. This is Arthur's gift to Zeke for becoming Duke's disciple. Seeing a black card in person made Zeke uneasy, making him stumble on his words. By his reaction, Arthur can see that he already knows what a black card means. You see, this thing is a credit card only given to a very select few. Zeke never would have thought that he would get to see one in person at all. Just having one gives you incredible benefits wherever you go, not to mention its non-existent credit limit. It's basically an infinite money glitch. Arthur happily explained that the card would be under both of their names, so Zeke could use it freely. Still feeling overwhelmed by the possibilities, Zeke swore to use it only when necessary. While his dad is making it seem like he's being nice, the veiled intentions behind such a valuable gift are too obvious. Since using a credit card leaves a record, this is just another method to keep track of what he's doing. But if this is Arthur's way of keeping tabs on him instead of assigning a black martial squad to tail him, that means the patriarch doesn't see him as a threat yet. With this, Arthur kindly dismissed his son and urged him to continue training and work hard to become the strongest in the continent. Zeke bowed one last time and thanked the master of the Drakers once more. He wordlessly walked out of the room, his mind reeling with unknown thoughts. Similarly, Arthur Draker closed his eyes and thought of his youngest son's words. Suddenly Duke showed up, calling Arthur a sickening old man. The patriarch just asked Duke why he was so angry. Thankfully, Duke is the only one with the balls and the strength to call Arthur out on his bullshit. This guy is suddenly playing father for the kid after a lifetime of neglect. Arthur argued that he had no choice. This is the price of being the head of the household. Furthermore, what Duke just said counts as defamation of the patriarch's character. Duke sat his ass down on the couch and dared Arthur to cuff him and take him away if he could. The master of Drakers smiled and dropped all pretenses. Out of anyone on the continent, Duke is the only one he can truly talk to without worries. He retrieved another thing from his lavish suit, a bottle of prized alcohol known as Dragon Breath. Being offered a drink to go with their conversation, Duke's mood lit up as he praises Arthur's taste when it comes to drinks. The patriarch brought up the strange atmosphere enveloping the continent, and Duke played dumb, insisting that he was just minding his own business inside the academy. But Arthur knows more than anyone else that Duke has eyes and ears all over the map. Duke then asked why Arthur would ask a question that he already knows the answer to. The Emperor has gone crazy over the idea of immortality and is scouring the entire continent for anything he can latch on. In Duke's perspective, such a thing is an impossibility. While magic can make someone look young, immortality has never been and never will be possible. The Patriarch shares the same opinion. However, he's worried that the Emperor is looking for a relic related to the Elder Dragon. That possibility definitely changes things. This is the end of the story today, but maybe there will be a next part. Make sure to hit subscribe button to not miss it.